If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this.
Paranormal Skeptics, what's your I don't believe in the supernatural or demons, but I have no idea what that frightening thing I saw was story.
When I was young, we lived in a very old house across the street from an ancient cemetery. One night I awoke in the wee hours needing to use the bathroom. To get there required walking through the laundry room. When I entered the laundry room, I encountered a woman who I initially thought was my mother hanging clothes to dry on the drying rack. I thought this was odd considering it was the middle of the night and she hadn't turned on any lights. When I asked why she was doing laundry in the middle of the night, she didn't respond. It was at that moment that I realized I wasn't looking at my mother. I ran screaming back to my bedroom. I never saw her again. Something is haunting my grandma's house. From the age of about 11 to 16, I stayed at my grandma's house most weekends. The house was built in the late 1870s in northwestern Wisconsin. I would rent a bunch of movies and watch them on the TV upstairs. I always had a very creepy feeling most of the time upstairs. I was particularly drawn to the front room, which featured an unusual small closet. There were times when my grandma would go out of town and I would stop by the house to bring in her mail. If I stopped after dark, the upstairs lights would all be on. I would sleep on the couch in the living room, which was right next to the stairs. It was a couch, wall, and stairs. One night, maybe around midnight or so, I heard something walk across the floor from the far corner upstairs to the stairs. Then come down the stairs. Those stairs were very squeaky. The noise stopped once the source of it reached the bottom of the stairs. I felt something staring at me. Like leaning around the corner to look at me. I already had my head under the blanket when I first heard the footsteps upstairs. After what felt like minutes, probably only seconds, something went back up the stairs and back to the far corner. Turned on the lamp and woke my grandma up. We went up there, and nothing was up there. All the windows were locked. I slept on the floor next to my grandma that night. I've always wondered if I would have seen something staring at me if I looked. When we sold her house after she went into the assisted living place, we had my aunt's friend come over and do a house cleanse. Since then, the house has undergone multiple sales. Maybe one day I will stop and knock on the door to ask the people living there if they've ever felt something off about the room upstairs. I was about 13, and I was attending a family reunion at my cousin's house out of state. It was a very large house on a lot of land, as they owned a tree farm and used most of the acreage for that. The nearest neighbors were miles away. I got to the reunion early with my mom to help set up, and my stepdad was going to bring my brothers later, one 10-year-old and 2-year-old triplets. I went upstairs to get something and looked out the window to see a little boy with blonde hair going down the slide on the playset. When I came back down, I asked if my brothers had gotten there and was told no. I was the only kid there at that point. My cousin that owned the house looked at me, then asked if I saw a little blonde boy on the playset. When I told him yes, he said he'd seen him often. Turns out the land they built the house on was previously a cemetery. There was still a bit of it left down the hill, which my older cousins took me to see, but they had no idea about it when they bought the land. They ended up moving out a couple of years later and had tons of strange activity. As a child, I often saw an old man standing over my bed. He never said my name, only my sister's. I was about 8, so this was terrifying for me. I would always sleep with the light on for years. At 12 he came back. This time, he stood by the side of my bed and gazed at me. I screamed, my parents rushed into my room, and he ran away. A few years down the line I was about 15. I reunited with my sister after not having seen her for 90% of my life. I told her about the scary man who calls my name when I am with her. She burst into tears and said, "I'm not going crazy." She had been seeing this man since she was a kid too. Except he would visit her every night, but first he would watch her by the door. And every night he would get 10 centimeters closer until he reached her. She moved out and lived with her dad. We are half siblings, and this was happening at the age of 8 to her, ironically. To this day he has not visited me. But whenever my sister comes to Sydney to visit, I feel his presence. I don't believe in ghosts or the paranormal, but I can't explain what happened to my partner and me 3 years ago. We just finished our first year of university, and we and a few friends decided to go on holiday to our friend's family's holiday home in Cornwall, England. The whole week was nice and normal apart from one night. Even though it was 3 years ago, I can remember so vividly what happened. Just as we were settling down for bed with the lights off, we heard a noise that sounded like someone flipping the light switch. The lights didn't come on, but the sound was pretty unmistakable. Neither of us commented until it happened again a few minutes later, both agreeing that it sounded like the light switch and that we'd heard the same sound earlier. Anyway, we put it down to the house settling, as it wasn't exactly a new build. Not being too concerned about the sounds on the other side of the room, we went to bed. I was just drifting off when my partner exclaimed, "What's going on?" I was confused, so I just asked him what was up. He claimed that he'd seen my silhouette sitting bolt upright in bed. However, I was lying down on my side facing away from him. I had most definitely not been sitting up. He then realized that I was indeed lying down, and we just put it down to his eyes playing weird tricks on him due to him being tired and it being darker than our room back home. Anyway, back to sleep we went. He was lying on his back, and I was still on my right side, facing away from him. Then things went up a notch. He distinctly recalled a cold hand grabbing his forearm tightly and very suddenly, but when he went to touch the hand, thinking it was mine, the hand was snatched away. He turned the lamp on and saw that I was on my side. The light woke me up, and he told me what had happened. From where he'd felt the thumb, he said it was a right hand. But I was lying on my right side, and the only way I could have reached around and grabbed him was for me to flip myself over to face him. Also, my hands were warm, so it couldn't have been my hand. It's safe to say that we were both pretty scared. We slept with the light on and talked about all the events and could not, and still cannot, fathom an explanation. Somehow he managed to get to sleep, but I lay awake for ages. In the morning we woke up. Nothing was unusual until we ran the tap in the bedroom. There was a random sink in the room for whatever reason, and the water ran red. He was freaked out, although, having grown up on a farm where we were not connected to the mains and our water was stored in big tanks and filtered by running through red sediment, I was 99% sure that the water for this building had the same system and that the water in the tanks was running low. Still a strange coincidence. We talked to our friend that morning about our strange night, and it turned out that he had had a weird experience of his own. He's religious and sleeps with a cross. The particular cross he'd brought with him was bright orange and plastic. We called it the rave cross, not that that's of any importance, but it was fairly large, about 4 inches, and it had gone missing in the night. We looked everywhere in his room for it, but it was nowhere. He left the house, never finding it. I really just have no explanation for what happened. The water I can understand, but it's a big coincidence. The noises, the weird silhouette, the grabbing hand, the lost cross. All in one night. The rest of the nights we spent there were completely normal for everyone, no sounds of light switches, but we slept with the light on for the rest of the holiday. I don't know, maybe someone can shine a light on the situation? It still freaks me out, and I'd like some peace of mind. Anyway, thanks for listening. There's a small graveyard off a small country road. It has several tombstones, all belonging to a single family. A local legend says that the youngest child was hit by a train, and if you listen closely, you can hear the sound of a running train when you stand in the graveyard. As a carefree teenager, my friends and I would occasionally explore the small area. We would play with Ouija boards, or hold a seance, or whatever spiritual crap we could think of. One night, as we were idling around, we all sensed a train passing by. We couldn't hear anything, but we could feel its gentle presence. We were obviously freaked out, so we decided to leave. While leaving, we look up the beaten road and see a man standing beneath a lamplight. We panic, get into our cars, and leave quickly. I'm not sure this is paranormal, but it's certainly not normal. When I was in college, my friend was in a relationship of sorts with this guy, Joey. One night, Joey made the 2-hour-long drive from his hometown, which is also our hometown, just to sit in his car and tell my friend how much he cares about her. That weekend there was a shooting in our hometown. A 16-year-old boy was shot by the police after brandishing a fake weapon during a mental health breakdown. My friend had also complained to me that Joey hadn't texted her at all that day, despite the romantic gesture he made the other day. The school had asked my friend to come into the administration building on campus, and she assumed it was for an academic matter, so she left. I couldn't resist making connections and formulating a theory that Joey was the one who died, only to have other friends refute this theory, pointing out that Joey was 18, not 16. I kept thinking about it and texted my younger sister, who still lived in my hometown, "Hey, do you know a Joey last name?" And she immediately texted back, "I heard. Isn't it awful what happened?" Ran over to the building my friend had gone to, and she was sobbing. The police found her info in his phone as his girlfriend and contacted the school to inform her. I have no idea how I knew it was him who died, especially because we all genuinely believed he was older than he actually was. I'm an atheist, and I don't believe in an afterlife, but I sometimes wonder if Joey needed me to know so I could go comfort my friend. I don't believe in ghosts, but really weird things are happening. I need help making sense of this. Although I have experienced many strange things that most people would consider paranormal, I've always come up with some sort of explanation. However, I cannot find any explanation for this situation. I lived at my grandparents' house until I was around 6 or 7. I shared a room with my sister, and my mom's room was at the end of the hallway right next to ours. I remember when I was young I would see a little girl standing in my bedroom doorway every night. She looked around 8 and had dark hair and a nightdress on. She never did anything except stand there and stare at me, so I was never really bothered. As I've gotten older, I have chalked it up to some sort of false memory or imaginary friend. I haven't thought about it much since. A few years ago I mentioned it to my mom, and she went pale. She said that she used to hear my sister, but mostly me, call her name during the night, but every time she got up to see what we wanted, we were both sound asleep. Apparently one night she woke up and saw the little girl in her doorway, then blinked, and she was gone. Then my mom told me that my grandpa had also seen the same girl walking down the hallway towards our rooms. I didn't know what to make of this at the time, so I kind of brushed it off. Here is where it gets strange, and I can't come up with any explanation. I moved back in with my grandparents last September. I'm 17 now. The first night there I was sleeping in my old room. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a woman standing a few feet away from the side of my bed. She was tall, had shoulder-length blonde hair, and had a flowy off-white or gray dress on. I sat up, and she walked out of the room. I just thought it was a weird, really realistic dream. Strange, but that happens occasionally. I spent the night at a friend's house yesterday, and in the morning my grandpa called me and told me he had to tell me something. He was being really weird and told me that he didn't understand why but felt like he had to tell me this. He said it was just starting to get light out, and he woke up. He saw a lady standing at the end of his bed. She just stood there for a few seconds. It was too dark for him to see her face, but he could tell she had on a lighter colored dress. He turned over to see if my grandma saw it, but she was still asleep. When he turned back, the lady was walking out of the room. My dog was lying in the hallway and started barking and growling like crazy. He said that he then heard heavy footsteps going down the stairs while my dog stood at the top barking. My grandpa has never mentioned anything like this to me, so it was really weird. They have lived there over 20 years, and he has never seen anything like that. These two experiences, along with, I guess, what would be considered poltergeist activity, just seem to be too strange. I'm really starting to question things. I need help figuring this out. Before, I never believed people when they said they saw full-body apparitions, but I'm starting to think it might be real. My grandmother is in a nursing home after suffering a stroke a few months ago. Mentally, she is all there. However, one side of her body is partially paralyzed, and she is undergoing rehabilitation in the nursing home. She's been weakened by the relative lack of activity, though. On Sunday morning, as we were getting ready to visit her, we received a call from the family of her old best friend. The friend had moved to Florida about 10 years ago, and they had gradually lost touch save for a Christmas card every now and then. Well, the friend had just died very early that morning, and they were calling to inform us of her death. We were the first visitors of the day when we signed in at the nursing home. We went to my grandmother's room and said hi. We also have a little visitor's book for people to sign in her room so we know who has visited her. Nobody had signed it since Saturday morning. As we walked into her room, she exclaimed, "Oh my, so many visitors this morning." We asked what she meant. She replied that she had gotten a visit from an old dear friend that morning. It was the friend from Florida who had just passed away. She told my grandma she was leaving for a while, not to worry, that she would watch over her, and that they'd meet again. My grandmother also remarked at how healthy she looked. I've never had chills run down my spine like that before. Later I asked if anyone had been to my grandmother's room that morning, and the staff said no. We asked if any phone calls had come through for her that morning, and they again said no. They also logged phone calls for residents, and when they checked the logs, there was nothing that they had forgotten. I also this morning called the family of the friend in Florida to offer my condolences and ask if they had called anyone else around here. I asked under the guise that I would help notify people around here, so I didn't want to double call people. They said we were the only ones they had called from around here, and the only reason they called us is because they thought my grandmother still lived with us. They had no idea until I told them this morning that she is in a nursing home. I know it's in the realm of reality that she could have simply dreamed it, but the chances of her having a dream like that with that sort of message on the very morning that her friend died are so remote that it still gives me chills. I am Catholic and believe in the afterlife, but I used to think that all the ghost stories people claim were either completely fabricated or products of active imaginations. However, I now believe that 99% of those claims are fabricated. I don't know how else to explain this. What did I see that night? Have you seen something similar or know what it was? My best friend, who was about 14 at the time, was staying at my house while my family was away for the weekend. Around 10:30 p.m., my best friend and I had the idea to go to the skate park, which is about a 5-minute walk from my house. She grabs my scooter, and I hop on my bike, and we head over to the park. On our way there, nothing was out of the ordinary. We got to the park with no issue. We hung out until about 11. I suddenly get an eerie feeling, and I realize we shouldn't be out that late, so I tell her we need to head back. She agrees, and we begin to head back, but we take a different way than the way we came. The path we were taking takes us past a brown church. This church has glass doors out front, and it has 2 streetlights so you could clearly see the door. I was walking beside my bike, and she was walking beside my scooter. For some reason, both she and I look at the church's door at the same time. We see this creature that had sharp teeth inside the church. Neither she nor I said a word to each other, we just left as quickly as we could to get back to my house. Once we got to my house, we threw the bike and scooter in the yard, and then I unlocked the door. We ran inside, and I locked the door behind us. I asked her if she saw whatever that thing was, and she said she did and asked me if I thought it followed us, but I told her no, I don't think so. I called my best guy friend, he grabbed his pocket knife, and we went back to the church, but nothing was there. We all headed back to my house and stayed in the yard. A year later I was watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and a demon Buffy fights called Der Kindestod appeared on the screen, and I nearly jumped out of my skin because it looked a lot like what I saw that day, so I sent a picture of it to my best friend without an explanation, and she said that's what she saw that night. After I turned 18, I told my mom about this experience. She believes in the paranormal but doesn't know what I saw that day. I think we saw a demon's true face that day, and I know I will never forget it. If you have any ideas of what the demon could be, please tell me. I have 2, actually. The first happened to me when I was around 8. My family and I were heading back to Dallas from Houston, and it was around 2 a.m. We were on a lonely 2-lane highway for about 1 hour without seeing any other cars. I was looking outside, and I saw a cloaked figure gliding right next to us at about 70 miles per hour. I stared at him for about 5 minutes before he turned around, and I saw his face. It was just a skull, nothing else. After that, he stopped moving, and we walked past him. I was too scared to say anything. The second story happened about 2 weeks ago, on a Saturday night, just like tonight. My wife had gone out with some friends, and I was waiting for her to come home because she forgot her keys, and I didn't want her waking the kids. She usually knocks on the window of our room, and I go to open the door for her. Well, it was about 3 a.m., and I heard 3 loud knocks, a little louder than usual. She scares easily, so I just figured she was in a hurry to get in. I opened the door just in time to see her struggling to open the gate, which was about 30 feet away. I didn't mean to scare her, so I never said anything to her about it. She would have had us move out. I still don't know who it was that knocked on my window. In 1992, shortly after my grandpa died, his possessions were being divided during the will reading, while 3 generations of my family sat at the dining room table, somewhat arguing over the items. My family is mostly money-grubbing shitbags. We heard a loud pop in the kitchen. The oven's glass front had exploded outwards. The oven/stove had not been used recently, and luckily no one was in the kitchen when it happened. Upon inspection, we found the kitchen floor littered with small broken pieces, causing them to flip around and produce crackling noises. At that time, I was around 10 or 11 years old and was trying to process what was happening. We were all trying to figure out probable causes, and we even called the company to ask if this happened often. The manufacturer said no. No surprise, fast forward to now. I Google exploding oven glass, and it turns out it can happen due to small cracks or nicks, temperature differences, or bending. Now it's not so scary to know there is a possible explanation and that it's not rare. What stands out is that the little pieces continued to move. Hopping kind of like fleas, flicking about. As my family begins to gather cleaning supplies, we notice 2 spots in front of the stove slowly clearing. It was the place my pops would stand and make food for the family. The little bits of glass flicked out of what looked like a set of footprints, not perfectly outlined but definitely identifiable as human. Before we cleaned up the glass, my great-aunt had the foresight to take Polaroids. As far as I know, she still has one, and my aunt has the other photo. It was definitely odd, but not as terrifying as it should have been. I feel like his energy had one last burst before leaving our plane, like an echo or something. I saw a ghost 25 years ago. Curious about other possible explanations. When I was a teenager, I'm 36 now, my parents had bought a newly built house in the southwest of the USA. No history with land. We live in a high desert area. When I was a kid, I was a terrible student. Lazy, bad grades, and I was punished for it. No electronics, and for TV, only educational programs were allowed. One day I'm alone breaking the rules and watching a movie. It's mid-afternoon, and I just get this feeling and look over my shoulder, and I see this woman in a white dress walking from the right side of my dining room towards the left side where the kitchen threshold is. She looks like a living person down to her knees, which seem translucent, the best way I can describe it. I jump to my feet and am overwhelmed with fear. The only thing going through my head is that there was something not right about her face, and if she looked at me, she would hurt me. I'm not moving, I feel like I'm paralyzed. Hell, I remember telling people it felt like I wasn't breathing. After a moment, it's like I blink, and she isn't there anymore. I am freaked out, but after a few hours and having the front door open so I could run out if she came back, I convince myself it's my imagination and turn in for bed. I don't tell anyone about what's happening. A very short time later I was getting ready for school, and my brother, younger, was waiting in our loft for me to be done so he could start washing up and getting ready. I come out of the bathroom, and he is on his feet and looks scared? Bothered? I ask him what's wrong, and he tells me he saw a woman in white in the reflection of our TV walk up from the stairs and go into my bedroom. I ask him to describe her, and he nails it down to the smallest details. He tells me then that he was afraid that something was wrong with her face and that if she looked at him, and he saw something bad would happen. We had small stuff happening at the house over the years after this. He told me he saw her once more in the dining room where I had. However, she was never seen again. This scared me so much I felt like I was putting myself in danger even talking about it or typing out the experience for years. But it didn't stop me. I'm just wondering, other than us both seeing a ghost, is there some kind of natural phenomenon, psychological or otherwise, that could have two people see the same thing if nothing was spoken about it beforehand? Or did we really see something completely supernatural/paranormal? I love ghost stories and the paranormal to this day because of this experience. I find it interesting, but I have a very hard time believing some of the other stories, so I don't blame you if you think mine is made up. Thanks, guys. When I was 8, I was visiting a friend who lived a few towns away. There was an Easter festival that both Maya and her family attended. At one point we asked if we could go wander around a bit. This was a rural area, so there were mostly fields and forests. We decided to go into the forest, and after about 15 minutes we found this big open area with muddy ground. The area was surrounded by single trees, and one of the trees had a little wooden hut attached to it, probably belonging to one of the rangers around there. My friend climbed up the ladder to the hut, and I followed behind her. Just as she was about to reach for the door handle, the hut started to shake, and there were loud banging noises coming from inside. We jumped off the ladder and sprinted back to the forest. However, my friend got her foot stuck up to her knee in the mud, and I had to yank her out of the dirt so we could run back to our parents. Years later, when I was about 12 years old, I invited that friend over again. My parents were out of the house, so she asked me if I'd be interested in communicating with ghosts. I was curious, so she pulled a makeshift Ouija board out of her bag. We set the thing up in the living room, candles, lights out, windows shut, and everything. There wasn't a lot happening, and all the questions we asked had very cryptic answers, so I thought it was just my friend ducking with me. Once we were done, I wanted to put everything away, but just as I was standing up, I lost all the feeling in my legs and fell to the ground. I was unable to move because I felt some kind of pressure keeping me down. It was still dark in the room with only one candle lit. It took about 5 minutes for me to regain the use of my legs, and I got up and ran to the light switch. My friend was still sitting where she sat during the seance, and I asked her what happened, and she couldn't remember. Apparently she blacked out for 5 minutes. The last creepy thing to happen in that house is a little hard to explain without visuals, but basically, we had a big room, which was basically a living and dining room combo. The room had one door that led to the hallway. The door had a big window where, if you stood at the right angle, you were able to see into the kitchen. My mom was renovating, and she actually switched the living and dining rooms. When I walked into the now living room, Mom was standing in the now dining room. All the furniture was put into the middle of the room so she could put up new wallpaper and stuff. I asked her what she was up to, and she started telling me about what kind of wallpaper and curtains would fit best with the aesthetic of the room, wildly gesturing. Being 17 and effortlessly bored, I was half listening, half just standing in one place, spinning around, being bored until my eyes caught something in the window of the living room door. I stopped and looked, and I swear to God, I saw a pitch black arm wave at me through the window for about 3 seconds before it disappeared. Quietly freaking out, I looked around to see if anything could make a hand-like reflection. There was nothing. I asked my mom if she could wave her arms around again. There was no reflection. I asked her if my sister was in the kitchen. She said that my sister went upstairs about 15 minutes ago. To this day I have no idea what the hell I saw, but oh man, I am glad I don't live in that house anymore. My brother passed away in 2008. Fast forward to 2016. I was asleep, and I had a dream about him, as I often did since he passed away. This dream was different. It was like he was talking directly to me, looking straight in my eyes. In the dream I asked him, "Is it really you?" He said, "Yes," I said, "Prove it." He then reached out and touched me on the arm, and when he did, I jolted up in bed, wide awake and covered in sweat. I thought all this was really strange, and I went to the bathroom to put some water on my face. As I was looking in the mirror, I saw that there was a backwards R written on my arm in pen exactly where he touched me in the dream. The letter R was the first letter of his name. There were no pens in my bedroom, and I have never sleepwalked before. You can call me crazy, or a liar, or whatever, but that was the single most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to me. When I was younger, my dad used to live in an old barn conversion out in the countryside near Leeds. I'd go around to stay there usually one night every weekend and occasionally during the week. My room was upstairs, sort of an attic room with a skylight and a big wooden beam that ran through the center. The house had been the barn for the farm next door. The woman who owned the farm still lived next door. It wasn't really a working farm anymore, but they bred Cocker Spaniel puppies there. My dad got a couple of spaniels from there over the years, so they were pretty friendly. I never really felt very comfortable in that room. It was cold and drafty, and since I only stayed there once or twice a week, I never really got around to decorating it in any way. Whenever I slept in there, I would sleep badly. I'm not prone to bad dreams generally, but almost every time I slept in there, I would have vivid nightmares. I would always wake up from these nightmares at around 3 a.m., and usually exactly at 3 a.m. I remember that after a few years of staying there, I would wake up from these dreams and know it would be 3 a.m. before I rolled over to look at the clock by my bed. It had really just become an annoyance. Later on I found out that 3 a.m. was supposed to be the real witching hour, and suddenly it all seemed a bit more spooky, although that might just be a line from a movie. I would often hear odd sounds through the night, like someone walking on the roof in heavy boots. The other sound I often heard was like random tapping on the skylight. It sounded like short periods of heavy rain on the skylight, which I tended to assume this was, being pretty typical for Yorkshire, but on a couple of occasions when this happened, I checked the weather, and it was clear and dry outside. I mentioned the noises to my dad. He said it was probably just birds on the roof. I never did see any birds up there, though. I was glad when my dad finally decided to move out of the place. I was having a drink with him a couple of years ago, and he was talking about how he thought the place was haunted. He'd had a few weird things happen there himself. I mentioned my room, and he told me that he agreed that it was spooky and that he'd once come back home and found the skylight wide open. Nobody had been in all day, and it was usually locked. Too heavy for the wind to have blown open. He also decided that now he felt comfortable telling me the story behind the house. Apparently the woman next door had sold the barn to be turned into housing because her husband had ended himself there. She awoke one morning to find him hanging from the beam up in the roof, the beam that ran through my room. I'm not sure if my imagination is embellishing this story a little here, but I seem to recall being told that he had come in from the fields on a rainy night to do it, and they had found him there still wearing his soaking raincoat and muddy boots, which might explain some of the noises I used to hear. Needless to say, I was glad he waited until he'd moved out before telling me all that. It was hard enough to sleep there when I just thought it was cold. I know this will sound made up, but here we go. A couple of years ago I had to drive my ex-girlfriend somewhere early in the morning. I got to her place a little early and ended up walking her up. I didn't get much sleep the night before and didn't feel well anyways, so I decided to lie in her bed while she got ready upstairs, making breakfast, putting on makeup, and stuff. So I lay there with my eyes closed, trying to relax before the fairly long drive. I start to get a headache, and every minute passing by, it gets worse and worse. Thought nothing of it, just the lack of sleep, right? Then I start to hear ducking white noise slowly getting louder until the point I just couldn't believe that my mind made this up or this was some kind of tinnitus. I turn my head to my right and open my eyes and see a ducking woman in a white dress lying beside me looking at me. She looked like she was in her mid-20s with dark hair and pale skin and looked even kind of pretty. I immediately closed my eyes and tried to convince myself that I'm just really tired and this is not happening. I keep my eyes closed, mainly because I'm scared shitless, until my headache feels like stabbing pain. I open my eyes again, hoping I don't see this lady again. She was Still. There. But this time she looked kind of like the nun from Conjuring 2. And she was screaming at me, but instead of a scream, I heard the white noise at an ear-deafening level. I almost started to cry and tried to scream for my ex, but my body felt numb like the stuff you get from the dentist. So I tried to scream her name as loud as I could, which was only slightly louder than normal talking. The white noise, headache, and numbness slowly faded, and my screams got loud enough for my ex to hear me. I told her everything. She comforted me, no pain, no sleepiness. What I experienced scared her so much she ended up switching rooms with her brother, and her mom, who is really spiritual, lit up some herbs to scare ghosts away afterwards. I don't know if I had a paranormal experience or not. I haven't really told this story much, never publicly, and I never knew if it was something paranormal or just a huge coincidence. So please let me know your thoughts. This was about 10 years ago. One night, my brother and I, 7 and 12, were up late, around maybe 11 o'clock at night. My mom and stepdad were both asleep upstairs in bed. My brother and I were both watching TV and being restless in the living room, messing around. I don't remember what was on the TV, but all of a sudden it went blank. It was like it was showing the color black. It wasn't completely turned off. My brother and I were both confused, and I tried to laugh it off, and I just said, "Well, that was weird." We sat in silence with the TV blank until it turned on to a movie I didn't recognize at first until it showed the title in the lower hand corner, The Exorcist, which was a movie that was forbidden in our house. It haunted my mom since she had seen it when she was a kid, and my mom experienced supernatural activity all her life, and watching that movie enhanced it. So it was never something we were allowed to watch by any means. The movie started to play, and I tried turning it off with our TV remote, but it wouldn't work. The movie kept playing, and it was loud. I'm pretty sure I said nope. And went over to the TV to turn it off. After I turned it off, my brother and I sat on the couch not knowing what to do for a second until the lights started to flicker. I remember it being so eerily quiet in the room. The air felt so thick. Then 2 separate lamps in the room dimmed at the same time. We didn't have dimmable switches or anything that made our lights capable of dimming on command. Both lights dimmed at the same time, first becoming darker, then brighter, and finally dimming again before returning to the normal light in the room. I felt like I was being watched the rest of the night. I had to keep it together so my brother wouldn't be so scared. I wanted to stay strong for him. I remember feeling like something was watching me in that house multiple times or seeing things out of the corner of my eye, but nothing was there. I always passed that off as me being paranoid, but I'm second guessing that now that I'm typing this out. Let me know your thoughts on this story and whether it's something that was just a random coincidence or something else. I had an experience when I was very young and wanted to share it. I've told close friends and family before, like a handful, but even if they say they believe you, you can tell that they don't. The incident happened somewhere around the age of 3 or 4 years old. My parents divorced when I was 2, and my mom didn't get remarried until I was 4. I wasn't in my crib anymore at this point and was in my own bed. At this point it was just my mom, sister, 1 year older, and I in this house. Everyone had their own bedroom on the first floor of the house, and it had a basement. I have so many memories from that first house, even some from before this event. I still even have a couple of memories of when my parents were still together. Even though I was very young, this is a true story. I haven't had anything paranormal or unexplainable happen since then. It's a memory that pops up every so often, and I just wanted someone to hear it. I also want to know if anyone else had a similar experience. This took place in Emporia, Kansas, in the mid-90s. It all started in the middle of the night when I felt my bed shake/move. It was nothing more than just one good shake. This woke me up, and I remember just lying in my bed a little confused. I wasn't scared at this point and was just lying there awake. I would wake up in the middle of the night around this time and go play in the basement. At this point I wasn't scared of the dark or anything. So, I was just lying there when all of a sudden I started hearing a rattling noise coming from under my bed in short bursts. The rattles were soft, normal tempo, and would have a pause in between bursts. I was confused and had an overwhelming feeling of looking underneath my bed to figure out what was going on. I leaned over my bed and took a peek. That's when I made eye contact with a gray being with big eyes that had a red tint to them. I remember them being fly-like, many lenses, and the light from the street light coming from the window was reflecting off of them. I was completely frozen in fear and was unable to move for what felt like forever. When I finally was able to lift myself back up on the bed, I was in shock. I tried to scream out for my mom, but my voice wouldn't work. I finally worked up the courage to jump off my bed as far as I could toward the light switch to turn it on. After turning on the light, I looked underneath the bed to see a baby rattle under it, which validated that I was hearing rattle noises. I ran to my mom's room and tried to explain to her what happened. Obviously she didn't believe me, and I slept in her room that night. I never knew exactly what was underneath my bed. But a few years ago I was watching a documentary called The Phenomenon. In that documentary they tell the story of the Varginha, Brazil, UFO incident in 1996. The two women that encountered the being had an artist draw what they saw. It was exactly what I saw underneath my bed that night and brought me some clarity. I truly believe this story is true and have nothing to gain from it. I'm mostly curious if anyone had any similar experiences or if anyone got any ideas of why this being would do this. If you got this far, thanks for listening. There is a part of me that just wants someone to hear my story. A few weeks back I was speaking with some friends about past jobs and why we left them. It was after a few rounds of conversation that I had a memory resurface about an encounter I had on the road while I was delivering pizza. I wrote it down in my notes as soon as I could. This was about the beginning of fall, maybe the start of winter. Things were just about to get cold in Texas. It was getting late, and the sun was setting, and I got an order for a delivery down a dirt road to a farmhouse. No big deal, as I took these sorts of orders all the time. I was no stranger to off the usual track orders. As I'm driving, I glance between my map and the road and notice that this little dirt road was an offshoot of this main road that was under construction at the time. It was a bit difficult to spot at first, but I found it and drove down into the unpaved, packed dirt roads. I drove a Mazda, which wasn't made for these conditions, so it was bumpy. The road itself was one of those winding dirt paths through a small thicket of trees, just your average backcountry road. I didn't really pay my surroundings much attention, as I was pretty well adjusted to creepy roads at this point, as living in a rural part of North Texas had desensitized me to dark, creepy roads. I arrived at the house shortly after, which was at the bottom of this steep hill. I parked on the top of it, right in front of the stop sign, thinking I wouldn't be long. I made my way down with a pizza, leaving my car on as I always do. I reach the door, ring the doorbell, and give the person his food. He was a nice man, a little reserved from what I remember. I turned to leave, and when I looked back up to the top of the hill, I saw what I can only describe as a shadow figure, its shape only barely human, peeking out from behind the stop sign at me. As soon as it noticed me watching it, it ducked and ran in front of my car. I could see the lights of my car dim slightly as if something passed in front of it. Immediately I got a cold feeling in my stomach and turned around and ran. I got in my car, checked to see if anything was in the back seat, and put my foot down without looking back. I made it out onto the main road and back to the pizza place, where I took a very long bathroom break in order to think about what I just saw. Now, it could have just been an animal or my imagination. But I'll never forget that shape. It was like a human but built all wrong, with jagged dark edges. I never could see any eyes, but I knew from the bottom of my soul that it was watching me. A few months later I quit, claiming that college was getting too much to handle. I still drive by that dirt road every so often. I refuse to go back down it ever again. I don't know if this is a ghost or shadow person. I have this thing that has followed me since I was little. The older I got, the more this, I guess, shadow person would appear in front of me to make itself known. I named it Gilbert to make it less scary and more like an annoying sibling who pops in now and then. It was always a feeling of something there that I couldn't see. Cups being thrown, pets being scared to go in areas of the house, and handprints in the shower's steamed mirror when it was clean and no one was home. When I was around 14, I started to see him, because it felt like male energy. We lived in an apartment now with a short hallway leading from the main bedroom to the living room and front door entrance. I would walk back and forth to do stuff like get ready, and I would look over to see a male figure, a shadow man, standing tall and scary. It's when you look away while doing something and are shocked to find it gone when you look back. I told my dad, who thought a homeless man might have just walked in. Then one day, when I was 16, Gilbert just walked into the room and stood there for a few seconds calmly and turned right into the hallway and walked off. No steps noise, no door opening noise, nothing. He was just gone. I just know I called my best friend, who lived 3 minutes away, and told her how scared I was. I told her how it was looking straight at me as I was calling her and how he had just walked out of view. What I hated was when he peeked his head into a room I am in. It feels like he's saying, "Hey, I'm right here, don't forget that," but it's annoying as it scares me. It doesn't feel evil, just possibly confused and curious. I started to talk to it, saying, "Stop scaring me, it's getting annoying because you startled me." Gilbert has been there after I moved out with my best friend and boyfriend at 20. At 22, my now husband and I moved into our own place. My husband claims he has never seen anything in his life that would make him believe in ghosts or the paranormal. However, he calls me when I visit family out of state to tell me that he feels the presence of something or someone in the house with him. We have a dog that will stare at the corners of the house like she's looking at someone. He will experience misplaced things that will make him think someone was living in the house, like a squatter. As I grew older, I learned more about shadow people. I'm not sure who or what he is. I don't even know what he's doing with me. Why me, and why has he been following me since I was a little girl? My Mexican Christian parents would notice odd things in the house, but talking to them about it was pointless. Update, I just wanted to add that this entity, I think, is not harmful. It always feels like he just wants me to know he's there, but it's more that I get startled, and I will be annoyed and will yell, "Stop scaring me." This is why I never really looked into getting rid of him. It's like having a glass of water on the table that never bothers you enough to pick it up and wash it. I know this is a strange example, but it captures how I feel. He simply exists in my life. Maybe he's just watching me in curiosity? Maybe he's a spirit guide? He has never tried to help me in deadly situations, as I haven't really had any. I can tell my animals see him too. I forgot to mention before seeing him as a kid, I had one instance that terrified me. Luckily, as a toddler, I had my grandmother living with us, and we shared a bedroom with separate twin beds. I was around 5, and I was trying to sleep when I felt something clink me. I looked, and it was my pink stuffed bunny, about the size of a Build-A-Bear, moving and crawling toward me. I froze in fear, and out of nowhere my grandmother got up and grabbed it, looked at me in silence, and tossed it in the closet. The next day she moved it to a storage box. Since that day she played a Spanish Christian service on the radio all night while we slept on low volume. She passed away in 2023. This experience was in 2005. She had lost memory in her later life, but I mentioned it when I was a teen, and she didn't want to talk about it. I've never much believed in ghosts and thought it superstitious. But last night I witnessed something extremely bizarre. Last night something very bizarre happened. Very bizarre. I've always been a logic-based lad, only believing what I can see with my own 2 eyes or what logically makes sense. I've always thought on this topic with ghosts and spirits and been like, I don't really believe it exists, but if it does, there really isn't anything to do about it. And they have as much right to be here as us. But I've mostly believed it to be superstition. So, for information, I, 21M, live very close by to a graveyard/cemetery. I can look at it from my apartment. It's roughly 20 meters to it, and I've lived here for 4 to 5 years. I've on multiple occasions walked through the cemetery at night, after 0 o'clock and generally very late, when on the way home. Nothing has ever happened. I've never been disrespectful in there, just as common decency, and I never believed in the occult. I've never been scared to go in there at late hours. But yesterday/today, Sunday 16th of March, 2 o'clock-ish, I woke from a dream. I can usually force myself to wake up when I dream, especially if it gets uncomfortable. When I dream I can wake myself up. It's quite nice, actually, but anyway. I had this weird dream where a snake or something tried to crush/suffocate me, which isn't a very comfy feeling, so naturally I woke up, and I could still imagine this feeling when I woke up. I blinked a bit and then looked to the right of my bed, where I saw this slightly obscured figure. It resembled a human female figure, and I couldn't make out the face. But the hair and the body were undeniably human and female, with dark/brown hair down to just above the shoulder. I wouldn't say I was downright scared, but I was shocked and a bit weirded out. I stared at it for roughly 1 to 3 seconds, and then it disappeared, like it flew obliquely through the ceiling, the way out to the street, in the direction towards the cemetery. I was just blankly staring at this point, thinking, what the duck just happened? Turned my head back to look through the ceiling and made the sign of the cross. I'm not religious either, and as I know a little Latin, I said, E nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, before looking at my phone to see the time. I do not know if this is just my imagination playing games or if it was sleep paralysis, besides the fact that I was able to move. I am no longer so certain about ghosts being superstition and religious fools believing it, I have to admit. But can anyone in here explain to me whether what I saw is a ghost or if it's simply my imagination doing tricks on me? If it is real, should I be worried? I think I took it quite chill. I didn't freak out or have any feeling of dread or fear, more like WTF, I guess paranormal stuff is true, and mumbled it to myself. Can anyone please help me out here? And share your thoughts? Thank you beforehand, I sincerely appreciate it. And thank you for taking your time to listen to this as well. I think I just saw a ghost, and I'm terrified. Alright, so I'm an agnostic. I don't really believe in anything spiritual or paranormal, but at the same time, I'm well aware that I don't know everything. I am working a night shift right now, it's almost midnight, in a care home. The care home consists of 2 buildings, the main one right next door and a smaller one with only a few residents. I'm working in the small one tonight, and I'll be the only member of staff around until morning. Both buildings are really old, and before becoming a care home, they were housing an orphanage with sick/deformed children. In the late 1800s/early 1900s, there are still some pictures of them on the walls here and there. From what I've been told, many of them unfortunately passed away here. About half an hour ago I was on my way out from a bedroom when I saw what seemed to be a lady wearing a white nightdress at the other end of the hall. For a split second I thought it was a resident who perhaps couldn't sleep, however, I soon realized that I could only see half of her body, vertically, as she disappeared, walking through the wall. The whole thing lasted only a couple of seconds. I froze there and tried to figure out what I just saw, then went outside to have a cigarette and try to calm myself down. I really don't know what to make of this. It has never happened to me before, and I'm very scared. Is there any logical explanation? Just to clarify, I am not sleep deprived, and I never hear/see things. I am an 18-year-old girl, and until I was 11 years old, I lived in a very old family home. I always knew my childhood home to be built back in the 1930s or around that time period and to have been lived in by generations. This home was peaceful, and we never felt threatened once. But there is absolutely no denying that there was something or things within its energy. I have 2 younger siblings and have lived with both of my parents my entire life. We all can remember the footsteps of heavy boots in the hallways at night, the pull-down ladder to the attic flinging down at random, and the shadows flashing around the corners and through doorways. My story starts when I was about 7 to 8 and would repeat about once every month or 2. I would be dead asleep in my childhood bedroom with my door closed, always for me, and randomly I would gasp awake. Almost involuntarily I would shift my sight towards the doorway, and my door would just crack open a little itty bit. A small girl would slowly peep in with her blonde hair and little white dress, making her way for what feels like an eternity to the bottom side of my bed. She would sit down very politely and stare into my soul. Every single time it was the exact same. She would whisper words to me that I have never been able to recall, but I sit there, and it's almost like a telepathic communication or understanding of her. It lasts for what feels like forever. Then, once she spilled all her words, she holds her dress to her knees and hops back off of the side of my bed towards the door. She leaves, and my door clicks shut. Immediately I shake out of my paralysis. I know that sounds like the climax of the story, but just please keep going on. So after a few years of this girl occasionally popping in and out like she does, I finally decided to tell my mom about these weird dreams. I think I never really thought to tell her because I was never scared of the young girl. She was always calm and polite, like I mentioned. So as I'm explaining to my mom the details of my dream, she stops me after saying, "Young girl." My mom looks at me with the weirdest expression and asks, "Is this little girl blonde, or does she wear a white dress?" I shook my head, saying yes quickly in disbelief, and she then thinned out her lips, saying, "I saw her looking around my doorway one morning." I don't remember much of what happened after that conversation I and my mom had, but I continued to have the same dream on and off until we moved. We own the land we live on and tore the old home down and had a new house built in the same place. I was 11 years old when we moved into the new house, and I remember a few months after moving in, the same girl. She came to see me one last time, and I haven't seen her once since that night. It's been over 7 years, and still no girl lol. My first undeniable encounter, and I need advice. So I live outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. My house is located in a rural area near a large white house, which I refer to as the big house. I'm assuming this land was all part of the plantation at one point. I'm not sure if any of this is relevant, it's just my intuition telling me it is. I moved in here 3 days ago after moving across the country, living in a guest room with my cat, and having a difficult time getting a proper spot to move into. This house is truly awesome, especially considering that it was built in 1988 and has been nicely renovated, featuring a beautiful half-acre property and a really cool large screened-in porch. This house fulfills all my expectations. Except ever since I have been here, my cat started acting all wild, like running around like she did when she was young and making noises I've never heard her make. Also hiding in places like her litter box, or when she sleeps, she shoves her face in the corner of the couch. She is performing actions that she typically refrains from. She is a 14-year-old cat that I've had since she was a kitten. This is my first indication that something potentially paranormal could be going on. On the second night of my stay, I was in the house. While I was in my kitchen, I heard what sounded like someone on the porch talking quietly to themselves or to others, so I opened the back door to check if anyone was outside. I didn't see anything, but I left the door open because I thought the air would be nice, and since there's a screened-in porch, there would be no bugs or anything like that getting into the house. This is when I had my first encounter. I don't know if this is a ghost or what it is. It's not like I see a person when I encounter it, but for lack of a better description, it's a large, blurry mass roughly shaped like a human, kind of like predator invisibility camouflage, lol, but it is 100% something that is aware of his existence, aware of my existence, and aware of my cat's existence and very intense feeling, but I don't feel like I'm in danger, but it was the most intense experience I've ever experienced because I didn't know what to do as it was 1 inch from my face and clearly showing its presence to me. Its presence was undeniable, and I could clearly pinpoint its location even after the encounter. It got really close to me on the first encounter, up to me, and I could see it moving from room to room pretty slowly and kind of curiously. It definitely was not bothered by my presence, and I felt like it was annoyed that I was here. I didn't know what to do, and I said, "Oh wow I have no problem with you, but I want you to get away from me and leave my house." I have never vocalized my feelings in such a manner regarding something unsettling in the past. I didn't feel like it was necessarily evil or wanted to cause any harm to me even though the experience was extremely intense and it scared the shit out of me, and my cat ran away immediately, confirming that she's been scared of this thing since we got here. But this leads me to my first question. Does anyone think this entity is a ghost? Or some kind of interdimensional, predatory, camouflaged being? I believe it is a ghost because the voices I heard and continue to hear are of an old woman. So the next day, I saw the same exact blurry thing 4 times in different places in the house in broad daylight. It looked the same but wasn't as alarming, I guess. I talked to some close friends and family, and I was referred to a reputable place to get armed up with an ethically grown white sage plus cedar smudge kit and an abalone shell. Also, dragon's blood candles, a legit Archangel Michael's candle, and actual white sage plus lavender incense. My cat actually has a tiny wire wrap on her collar with citrine in it, and I was told citrine can help in this situation. My cat wasn't wearing it during the first encounter, and since I put it on her, she seems way more relaxed, could be all coincidental. When I got home from getting all this stuff, it was still daylight, and I didn't see it anywhere or hear anything, so I decided to not smudge right away. It was suggested at the store that I try not to aggressively smudge the place, and since I felt like it wasn't in the house or active or whatever, I just started making some beats and just chilling out. I then went outside to smoke a cigarette on the back porch and heard someone moving around and talking quietly out there, and before I could go inside or even react, there were multiple of the same predator camouflage entities or beings. Again, undeniably visible where they were at even as they moved. There were 5 or 6 in total this time, and one was shorter than the original one, while the others were much taller. They went into every room and were constantly moving around. I lit the cedar and the sage and told them that I have no ill will towards them, but I told them to leave my house. I said it non-aggressively but sternly. I've never personally ever smudged before this, so I didn't really know what to do beyond going to every room. All signs of them were completely gone. And I lit the St. Michael candle and then sat on my couch after burning the sage and cedar in every room. All of a sudden I was surrounded by all of them again, but more intensely because I could feel them, and it was almost as if I was sitting inside of them. They followed me around to every room I went into until I lit the dragon's blood candle. Their presence was aggressive. So next question, is it possible for them to be attached to the land rather than the house? I would also appreciate any advice or thoughts. P.S. As I've been typing this, I've seen one of them twice. However, their activity has decreased significantly. I look forward to hearing back. My ghost story. This is my ghost story. Let me start by saying I do not believe in ghosts because there is no proof, but I never forgot this one experience I had where I almost believed in ghosts because of it. I was 7 or 8, I think. So my mom and dad, I think more so my dad, decided to seek someone that does cards. You know, the people that like to lay the cards on the table and tell you your future or something you want an answer to. I don't know. Basically, I have forgotten everything that happened that day except for this particular moment because it was really creepy. So we have a statue of Mama Mary in the middle of our garden. I think it went with the house when we bought it, but I'm not sure. If I remember correctly, she said that we should take care of that statue. I'm not sure. But what I 100% remember to this day is when she said that there were 2 men guarding the statue. That's literally all I remember. Fast forward to that same night. I heard our dog, a Shih Tzu, barking at the garden, so I went out and saw the dog standing right in front of Mama Mary, looking up and barking not at her but beside her. I immediately remembered what the card girl said and got goosebumps and just went inside and just watched TV. That's my ghost story again. I don't believe in ghosts because there's no proof, but this story always forces me to leave a little room for a what if. A haunting that left me at a loss for an explanation. I hope you are all having a wonderful week so far. It's almost over. So, let's all make sure to end things on a great note. I have shared a couple of things, and I'm a pretty active commenter. I typically try to debunk misconceptions and highlight the dangers associated with carbon monoxide, so I encourage everyone to install carbon monoxide detectors. I'm a paranormal investigator. I'm notably a skeptic. I believe, but I try to approach things with a measurable degree of skepticism. It's important to rule out the clear and present dangers in a situation before you look at the paranormal. This is one of those cases where I am at a loss for an explanation. I was investigating a residence. Two friends, whom I'll call M and K, were living in a rental home and experiencing increasing levels of paranormal activity. I always jump at the chance to investigate residences. It's one of my favorite ways to investigate. M and K are both female. M had a girlfriend, and K had a boyfriend. They all had issues in the house at one point or another. The gist of it all was that they were hearing things in the house that sounded like each other. Kay had an experience while alone in the house where she claimed that she heard her boyfriend coming in through the front door and calling her name. She went down to find nobody there. But she got the feeling that her boyfriend was trying to scare her. She heard noises coming from a downstairs room, and she went in, expecting her boyfriend to jump scare her, but found nothing. M and her girlfriend were in bed one night when M heard Kay and her boyfriend fighting. He was really yelling at her and calling her some very profane things. She got out of bed to go confront her best friend's boyfriend, but upon investigation, she found Kay asleep in her bedroom. Kay's boyfriend had an experience one night. M had called him from the bathroom to ask him if he could go up to her room and grab her bra for her from her dresser. Kay's boyfriend was a gentleman about it and went to grab Kay to carry out the task. Kay was insistent that M was at her brother's house but grabbed the bra and went downstairs to find nobody in the bathroom. I did my usual. Ran my carbon monoxide detector. Nothing. This is a must. I'm not investigating a house with built-up carbon monoxide. I walked through the house with my EMF detector. M is also a paranormal investigator. She takes a slightly more spiritual approach to it, though. The main reason I was there was because she wanted another set of eyes in the house. I got some readings. The readings were higher than the average. I also prefer to investigate at night. You just get more unfiltered results that way. Also, as I naturally always question the authenticity of things, I do also have a bug detector. I usually don't use this in front of people. I don't want them to take it personally. However, I also want to avoid any negative reactions. I found no external factors that would let me believe that they tampered with anything to fake the haunting. Did some spirit box sessions with them at night. I got K, M, and Doctor. I'm an optometrist by trade. I took that as a good signal that whatever it was knew enough about me. Now, this was one of the more up-close and personal encounters I had. I slept on their pull-out couch. I wasn't asleep. It was about 1 a.m. at the time. I was reading a book on my tablet when I heard the door to their basement open. It was maybe 10 feet from the couch. Really easy to hear. The creaking sounded deafening at that hour. Out of the quiet, I hear a voice saying, "Hey, come here." I still get the chills when I think about it. My arm hair is actually standing at attention. I got up and went to look. You read that right. I did that. To be honest, I would do it again. I'm much more interested in uncovering the truth. I stood at the top of the staircase to the basement with my phone's flashlight. As soon as I stepped down onto the first step, the door closed behind me. To make it worse, the door locked. I started banging on the door, but eventually I just called M from my phone to come downstairs to open the door. On the other side of the door, I could hear only what I can describe as a cackle-like whisper. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, but I also left the house with the notion that not everything can be explainable. I told M and K that if they wanted me to come back and investigate further, I would. They ended up doing a cleansing, but once that failed to rid the house of the entity, they ended up moving. As of right now, neither of them has reported any paranormal events since leaving. So, yeah. That's one of my stories that left me lost for an explanation. Hope everyone has the most amazing rest of their week. Stay vigilant. Stay observant. Be safe out there. Sending everybody so much love and really big hugs. So, I think I had a paranormal experience in Portland. On the weekends, I help my auntie's salon business with weddings. We do hair and makeup for brides and bridesmaids in many different places. When we travel, we stay in hotels, of course. This past weekend we had a wedding in Portland. We stayed at a Hilton hotel. It was a nice hotel in downtown Portland. The location wasn't known for any paranormal experiences. However, the night we stayed, we experienced something strange. She always wakes up earlier than I do. She woke up that morning at about 4:45 a.m. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. At 5, my alarm was going off, and it was sitting on the nightstand between the two beds. I have bad eyesight and wear glasses. So of course it was dark, and I couldn't see very well. When my alarm was going off, I reached for my phone, looked at the time, and hit stop on the alarm. I looked over at the other bed, and my auntie was lying down. She was facing me with her eyes open and her hands folded underneath her head. I thought it was weird that her eyes were open and she was looking at me. But, once again, I have really bad vision, and I thought maybe I just wasn't seeing it very well. Her eyes looked like big, dark holes. I truly believed that my vision might be distorted in the dark without my glasses on. I squinted my eyes to try to see her better, but it just kept looking weirder. So I decided maybe we don't have to wake up as early as I thought, and she was just resting. So I decided to lay back down on my back and close my eyes again. Then about 5 seconds later, I heard the bathroom door open. Then my auntie walked out of the bathroom and told me we needed to leave in 20 minutes. Of course I jumped and felt really freaked out because I swore she was just in the bed. So I looked over to the bed, and no one was there. I thought maybe it was just a trick of my vision because it was dark and I didn't have my glasses on. She told me she was going to pull the car around and to hurry and get dressed and head downstairs, then left. When I was by myself in the hotel, I had a weird feeling like someone was watching me. So I rushed to leave. After we got morning coffee, my auntie said something strange. She told me she woke up around 2 a.m. from a weird feeling that someone was looking at her. She has better vision than me but still has to wear glasses sometimes. She said when she felt like someone was looking at her, she turned over to look at me. Once again, this was at 2 a.m. She said she saw me lying on my side with my eyes open, staring at her, but my eyes looked like two big dark holes. She said it was kind of scaring her but decided it was just her vision playing tricks, and she went back to sleep. When I told her what I experienced, we were thoroughly creeped out, and the rest of the day we both felt really foggy and weird. Was this a paranormal experience? Or just something weird? True paranormal confession. First and foremost, it's not a ghost story but an encounter with an energy that is undefined from my understanding. I was on a road trip to Leh, India, with my elder brother in August 2015, and we started from New Delhi. The first destination on the card was Manali, which is 550 kilometers and around a 14-hour journey. We started early at 4 a.m. and targeted 9 p.m. to reach Manali. We maintained the pace quite well until heavy rains in Mandi, Himachal Pradesh, made it impossible to ride further. We were nearly 120 kilometers away from Manali, and it was 6 p.m., but rain made us stop for 2 good hours and loss of sunlight. Everyone who had been on hills told me not to ride at night but never specified why. I considered it as generic advice, as you cannot see anything beyond the roads at night, and pitch black surroundings make it hard to ride bikes. As soon as the rain stopped, we resumed our journey, but now we were slower than before due to slippery roads and less visibility, as the rain had not stopped completely. I remember a board stating Manali 44 kilometers, and since it was a single lane, one-sided road, we were sure to cover it in the next 2 hours, making us reach by 11 p.m. I saw a white building on my right. It was brightly lit and looked amazing. Next was a small bridge where a red Tata Nano was parked on the left, and then I saw a calf trying to eat grass from the roadside. Nothing unusual, right? My brother was left a little behind as he was facing some troubles with his luggage tied on the rear seat of his bike. I was indeed riding alone. Then, after some time riding on a single way, I saw an astonishing and brightly lit white building on my right, then a small bridge where a red Tata Nano was parked, then a calf trying to eat grass from the roadside. It could be a coincidence. Government buildings are mostly the same, and people love the Tata Nano anyway, and oh, cows and calves are next to the human population of India. My brother was still not in sight. I called him, and he said to move ahead, he will catch up. I moved ahead. Let me tell you, I'm indeed a good rider on hills. I maintained 80 km/h even in those conditions. So, this time I slowed down to catch up with my brother. All this while, I didn't see a single vehicle coming from the other side or overtaking me. My brother was definitely far behind. And I wasn't drunk or high either. I live clean, no alcohol, no drugs, no smoking either. I saw a brightly lit white building on my right, a small bridge with a Tata Nano parked on the left, and a calf trying to eat grass from the roadside. This was the time I realized something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I stopped there and waited for my brother to catch up. He came after a good 15 minutes and asked me why I had stopped. I told him about what I saw, and he said he didn't see anything like this and had been riding straight for only some time. I asked him to lead the way, and I followed. I still remember what we saw that made us weak in the knees. It still chills my spine while writing. We saw a brightly lit white building on the right, a small bridge where a Tata Nano was parked, and a calf trying to eat grass from the roadside. I shouted, pleaded, apologized, cursed, and asked for forgiveness if we did something wrong. We stopped there for a few minutes as none of us had the courage to move ahead. We prayed to the gods, known or unknown, and started one more time. Just 2 kilometers ahead we saw a board that said Manali 40 km. Neither my brother saw it before, nor did I. I still don't know what it was. Was it a parallel time that didn't reflect my brother, who said I was ahead only 15 minutes while I rode for nearly 2 hours? Or it was a supreme power trying to save us from something ominous, as the weather ahead was really bad and we could actually touch the clouds with our bare hands. We told this to one man we met in Keelong only after he told us something similar happened to him long ago on the same route. My old house was haunted. Okay, so I used to live in an old house. It was about 100 years old. It was 4.5 acres of land. Very old farmhouse, and the people who had lived there before my grandmother had a daughter. I don't know whether this story is completely 100% accurate, but what I was told was the girl was having a birthday party, and she was jumping on her bed, and she had fallen out of the second-story window at the time. That window was in my grandmother's room, and when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I lived in the bedroom across the hall, and there was a bathroom up there, and one night I had woken up, and it was dark, and I felt that there was someone breathing on my neck and staring at me, so I sat up, and I looked at the doorway, and there were 3 shadowy figures. 2 of them looked to be adults, and one of them looked like a small child somewhere between 4 and 9, and I was so scared because I remembered my sister telling me that story, so I started crying, and my grandmother heard me and woke up and flipped on her lamp in her room, and the light spewed into the hallway, and the figures were gone, although for the next couple of months it kept happening every night, the same thing except for the crying and waking up my grandmother. In the middle of the night, I would awaken to the sensation of someone staring at me and breathing on my neck. I'd sit up and look at the doorway, and I'd see the figures. Sometimes there'd be 3 of them. Sometimes there would only be 1, but most of the time it was just the small-looking one and the shorter adult-looking one, and I was little, so I was kind of freaked out. But then I realized that she was just a kid too, and I thought maybe she wanted to be my friend. So at night when I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would start talking to her. I don't know if she ever heard me or was actually interested, but it seemed as if she could understand me, and one day she just disappeared. I don't know where she went, but time skipped to a couple of years later when I'm 13. My parents told me we were moving, and after they told me that, I started waking up in the middle of the night again and seeing her in the doorway. It kind of freaked me out as it did in the past, and then I remembered she would just stand there and look at me. Sometimes I swear I could see her blink, but I guess that was just her way of saying goodbye. I think about these memories all the time. My parents and my sister call me crazy because they don't believe in ghosts or paranormal things, but the night before I actually left for good, a couple of strange things happened. I woke up in the middle of the night like usual and saw nothing in the doorway, which was strange, but then I looked around my room in the dark and saw her at the foot of my bed. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, and then she was gone. I thought it was weird at the time because usually she would only stand in the doorway, but I heard something after she disappeared. It was a faint whisper, and I could have sworn she said goodbye. It sounded sad, like you'd never see that person again. Type of goodbye. I thought it was rather sweet. I whispered goodbye too and fell back asleep. Looking back on it the next day, I thought it was a dream, but a year later, as I'm writing this, it wasn't. Honestly. It creeped me out. However, if you consider it from a different perspective, it can also be seen as somewhat sweet. Is my nephew seeing things? Maybe. So I have a nephew who is 5 years old, and occasionally he comes over to my house with his older brother when his mom goes to work and stays the night because there's no one to watch them. Now we live in an apartment building, so that's our living arrangement. He falls asleep in our living room, where we have a pull-out couch, just before I leave for work. He comes into my room, and I ask him what's wrong. Then he tells me to come into the living room, and he points to a corner near our chairs where our dining room set is, and he points through the wall and just keeps pointing there. I asked him why he was pointing at that wall, and in the back of my mind I thought he thought that there was something there, and I was saying to him, no, there's nothing there. I don't see anything, but then again, a child's mind sees things that we don't sometimes. When you're a kid, I didn't have that feeling, but then again, I did feel like I could feel people's emotions. I don't know. I got that from my grandmother because she can see things too, but I don't know. Do you think he sees anything that freaks him out? I don't believe in ghosts or anything paranormal, but I otherwise don't know how else to explain what happened, and I'm sure there are plenty of skeptics or others who may be able to make more sense of it than me. So here goes. I was just lying in bed, my girlfriend was in the bathroom, and I thought I saw her awkwardly walk by the door to the bedroom, so I looked up to see what was going on. I was surprised to see that it was not in fact my girlfriend but an otherwise unknown man with shoulder-length hair. Now, just to clarify, it's 11:30 p.m., which isn't insanely late but late enough that I can't think of any reason there would be an unknown visitor, let alone someone who I can't recognize. So here I am looking up at this strange man, whose facial features I can remember but none of his other features, be it height, clothes, or anything else. Although I certainly remember him having a body. As I was looking at him, he slowly turned his head to me, looked me in the eye, and walked away without breaking eye contact. It's worth mentioning that I've dealt with a home intruder in the past and know that my fight reflex kicked in at full force. But in this instance I felt strangely calm. Because I had just seen somebody just walk through my house, I of course had to check to make sure everything was okay and everyone was safe. I followed the direction he went, but it only led to a closet blocked by boxes, making it inaccessible, or to a spare room upstairs with no other exits. If I had missed his direction, the only other option would have been to enter the locked bathroom where my girlfriend was. After walking into the room to check on what was going on, no one or nothing out of the ordinary was there except for the fact that the room was noticeably colder than every other room in the general vicinity. I checked every possible hiding place, but nothing. Other than that, after a minute or so, I heard my girlfriend finish in the bathroom and walk in to find me confusedly looking through an otherwise empty room. It might be worth mentioning that shortly after I messaged a friend about what happened, all my messages were sending delayed and out of order, but I feel as if that was just networking errors. Does anyone have any explanations about what I just witnessed? Because I don't believe in ghosts, but besides that, I'm 100% convinced I saw a ghost. Feel free to ask for any extra details, but I feel like I've covered it all pretty well. My only paranormal experience. This experience occurred when I was approximately 13 or 14 years old, which was about 14 years ago. But I'll set the vibe. We had moved into this house when I was 6, and I never liked it. Could never settle in it. For months after we first moved in, I would actually put myself to sleep by repeating, "There's no such thing as monsters." Anyways, 2 years later, my little brother was born, and when he was 3/4, he moved into my old room, and I got the bigger room. He would always wake up screaming, saying there was a man in the corner of his room trying to light it on fire. We could only get him to settle back to sleep if we put on Fireman Sam, the kids' show. Even when he slept in my mom's room, he'd have these episodes, waking up saying someone's in the corner and there are bugs crawling all over the ground. So creepy, but we thought maybe a bit of night terrors or imagination. Fast forward another 5-6 years. I was having breakfast, and my mom told me she had such a strange experience the night before, and she was so scared she was going to come sleep with me. She said she was asleep but woke to the sound of someone breathing in her ear. Now, in her sleepy haze for a few seconds, she thought it was my brother but then remembered he was at his dad's. She jumped up and turned the light on. Nobody there. So I went to school and came home to her burning sage in her room and her room only. I was like, "Would you not sage the whole house?" "No?" But she only had a little left and was going to get more tomorrow. Grand. I didn't give it much thought, nor did I genuinely believe her account. Until the next morning I was off sick from school, tonsillitis. Mom had gone to work. I was happily sitting in my bed playing Sims. Then I felt it. I experienced a sensation akin to a bubble encircling my head, akin to the sensation of being submerged. And then I heard this really breathy breathing in my right ear, the one that if someone was standing beside me, that'd be the ear they'd be breathing in. Now it wasn't scary breathing, it was just big, deep breaths, and I didn't feel threatened, but safe to say I shit myself and legged it downstairs. I rang my ma and told her and stayed downstairs all day until she came home. The woman forgot the sage. Grand, I'll just get murdered. Thanks, Ma. I went to bed, nothing happened, but the next morning, same setup, I was happily playing Sims, and it happened again. I remember I just put my hands up and said, okay, I'm going downstairs, but this time I made sure to take my laptop with me to continue playing Sims, lol. My mom came home that day with sage and used it to cleanse the entire house. It didn't happen again after that, But a few weeks later my nanny bought me a special heat-resistant mug for drinking green tea from. That was our thing, and my mom and I were standing in the kitchen talking and making tea, and I said as I was pouring the water into my new cup to make the tea, "Hey, I think the ghosts are gone." And when I say I hadn't even put more than a drop of water in, it was barely a splash, and the whole glass just shattered into millions of tiny pieces. My ma and I exchanged glances, laughed, and said, "Well, I guess not then." But yeah, that's my story. Nothing else ever happened after that. We moved a couple of years later, and then my lovely mom one day told me, "Oh yeah, when I was younger, that house was boarded up, and a group of us broke in and did a Ouija board, and things started moving around the place, so we ran and never went in again." It may seem absurd to open a portal to the spirit world and then have us all relocate 15 years later. This story is completely true, and I have not had any other experiences like it since then, nor do I wish to have any. I was an atheist prior to this experience. I'm 49 meters. By the time I had reached my early 20s, I believed there was nothing to life but what you could see or touch, nothing else. If you're listening to this, then you know that is no longer the case. I guess the best way to start would be to tell you about a friend I had in high school, Todd. I had met him through another guy that I had known since 6th grade. Todd was just a really good guy, always upbeat and loyal, just a solid person. Looking back on it, she was probably the most genuine human being I had ever met, including up until now. We were around the same age, and when I was around 19, it had been a while since I had seen him, and our mutual friend called me and told me Todd's house had caught fire and he had died trying to save his younger siblings during the fire. I can't remember exactly, but I know he made several trips in the house, saving at least 2 of his siblings, and went in again, and the roof collapsed on him and another one just like 5 feet from the door, ending them both. Just a horrible thing, I couldn't believe it. It was the first person apart from an elderly family member that I knew who passed. Fast forward 4 to 5 years, and I'm in my car heading to a friend's house that lives in the same neighborhood where this happened. I'm maybe a mile or so away from where I'm headed, and about 100 yards or a little more ahead of me, walking towards me, there is a guy in jeans and a dark hoodie with his hands in the hoodie pocket and his head down like he's looking at the ground as he is walking. For one, this is how I remember Todd. It seems like I always remember him wearing jeans and a hoodie and maybe a jean jacket, and what really caught my eye was his gait. I think Todd had one leg a little longer than the other one or something. He just had sort of a limp. I could have picked him out of a crowd just by his walk. It was very unique. So as we are getting closer to each other, I just feel something is not right or just off. I can't really put my finger on it, but as I get to him, I slow down and stop right next to him, and he stops as well. As we both come to a stop, he raises his head and looks right at me. We were just about 10 feet apart, one lane of a 2-lane road anyway, when he looks at me. It's him, and his face is glowing the most brilliant green you could imagine. We looked at each other for maybe 4 or 5 seconds, it seemed like, and he had this calm, peaceful look on his face. I think I was in shock, I guess. I don't know, but I let my foot off the brake and coasted probably 30 or 40 feet down the road and stopped again, but I was too scared, I guess, is the word, to look back, so I sat there for a few seconds and just pulled off and went to where I was going. I hear people talking about the colors in heaven being so much brighter or just more beautiful than colors here while explaining NDEs, and I think I get it. I think that's where this green was from. About a week before this happened, I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine, and I explained to him I was an atheist. I truly believe Todd was on that road that day to let me know there was something else. There is more to life than just what we can normally see. It changed my whole outlook on life in a split second. Well, that's what happened. Sorry about being so long, but every word is the truth. I have had experiences since then, but the rest are dark. Maybe I will write about those also. God bless you all. Northern Appalachia is just as weird as the South. A few years back I lived in Berkshire County, Massachusetts, named for the Berkshire Mountain Range. The Berkshires are actually a subrange of the Northern Appalachian Mountains, and I assume, if you spend any time in paranormal spaces like this forum, you know weird shit happens in the Appalachians. I guess I figured since I was so far north, I was safe from the usual appy haunts, safe to whistle at night, or walk the woods alone, or to not close my curtains after dark. I was wrong. It was either late summer or early fall of 2020, and my fiancé and I were leaving the tiny suburb where we lived to go to a nearby bigger city for cheaper groceries. In order to get there, we had a 20 to 30 minute drive, the first leg of which was through a heavily wooded, hilly area. It must have been around 6 or 7 in the evening, still bright out and well lit, though visibility was poor because everything was lush green bushes and trees. We were driving up a hill road with a couple of houses, both sides of the street full to bursting with plant life. The green was super dense and impossible to see through. It was warm, so we were driving with the windows down. As we got to the top of the hill, we heard a strange noise. My partner and I both grew up surrounded by woods and wildlife, so we know deer when we hear them. Some people who are unfamiliar with deer might think they're serene and totally silent, but when deer want to be loud, they can make some haunting sounds. Especially if it's a male calling long distance, it's like a long, booming honk, like a war horn. Think of the family of a bagpipe, but with an edge that clearly marks it as animal instead of mechanical. We identified the sound as coming from a deer, but it seemed to be injured. The honk was distressed and wobbled at the end like the deer was losing strength. Unfortunately, people often speed in the area, making it plausible that some reckless driver had hit a deer and left without calling animal control or offering any assistance. We couldn't see skid marks, blood, or a body on the road, so I asked my fiancée to pull over into someone's driveway so I could check the dense foliage on the sides of the road.
Deer like to hide themselves and hide their babies, and I, a bleeding heart animal lover and also an idiot, was on the verge of panicking about how we were going to help this injured baby deer.
I was already making plans to visit the veterinary hospital in the area that kept late night hours as I began pushing aside bushes and looking around. I've never interacted up close with a deer, so I was making soft little come here, kitty sounds, cats being my only reference at the time. I searched the bushes on the side of the street with the houses, which was slightly less dense because of the driveways, but I found nothing. I checked both ways and crossed to the more heavily wooded side and began looking there. I have poor eyesight, so it took me a while to sort through the green. My fiancé was busy speaking with the homeowner of the driveway we were parked in. He had come out to see if we had had an accident or flat tire and if we were okay. Luckily, I heard a rustle. My heart dropped as I realized it was right against the edge of the road, in the very first row of bushes. The location was unsuitable for a deer to hide, implying that its condition might be more dire than I initially believed, given its inability to delve deeper into the foliage. I moved downhill towards the sound, placing myself right at the crux of the road's turn. The road turned into a blind corner. The rest happened so fast, but for me it felt like slow motion. I bent down to move some branches aside where I thought the rustling had come from, hoping that the animal wouldn't run or try to jump at my face. I was so entranced by the idea of finding the animal and helping it. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I had left a hurt animal behind. I finally cleared away the branches to reach the bottom of the bush, where I could see the ground covered with leaf litter. Baby deer camouflage nicely in fallen leaves and dirt, so I stared into the space hard, but there was nothing there. There was nothing to be seen, no shape, no eyes, no movement, just pure dirt. Still, I felt compelled to stay there, in that position, back to the road. It felt like if I just looked long enough, the deer might appear in front of me. What actually appeared, directly behind me, was a speeding minivan taking the turn way too freaking fast. There are no sidewalks on this street and no guardrails, there was just the blind turn, a bad driver who couldn't calculate right, and me, at the edge of the road, not looking. I heard the van, and that alone forced me to rip my eyes away from the bushes. I threw myself out of the way of the van and into the leaves, tripping backwards until my back hit a tree that steadied me. Only a moment and a few inches separated me from complete destruction. The van didn't even stop, didn't acknowledge that they'd almost flattened a person. My fiancé called for me. The search for the deer, which we hadn't heard call again since we first pulled over, was too dangerous to continue. I looked both ways about 1,000 times, panicking, and jittered my way over to the safer side of the street in the driveway we were in. We got back into our car, listened a moment more, and then left on our grocery run. My fiancé could tell something had happened, and I believe they had suspicions that something other than just the car spooking me had occurred. I didn't want to talk about it, we were still driving through the woods, after all, and we'd have to drive back this way. I kept it to myself, the pull I had felt, the hypnotic way I could have spent hours looking into that hollow in the bushes, the way I felt so sure I would find the injured baby I was looking for if I'd just stay right there in that spot. The way I was sure now, as we pulled away, that there wasn't and had never been an injured deer. Something called me to that spot, and I ignored all the Appalachian advice I had ever heard. I answered, and I almost ended up a smear on the pavement for it. I don't know why whatever was there wanted to cause someone's death. I don't know why I was able to avoid it succeeding. I don't know many things about the motivations of the old things that live in the Berkshires, what they are and why they do what they do. If they hate us, or if they're just hungry. But what I do know is they exist. They're dangerous. Every bit as dangerous as their southern cousins. The northern Appalachians may not be as popular of a topic, but they're no less old, wild, or vicious than their southern counterpart. I guess I'm sharing this because I want people to know that. To remember that. These mountains are older than bone, older than the rings on Saturn. And shit just as old exists here. If we lose sight of that, if we think some miles of distance and a different state boundary protect us, we are walking into a trap with eyes wide open. Be careful in the Berkshires. Be careful in the Appalachians, wherever you are on them. And if you hear something call to you, no, you didn't. I moved into an apartment with my wife about 6 months ago. There has been a progressive number of events that have taken place, and we are not really sure what they could be. For some background, I'm agnostic. My wife practices witchcraft. My wife has a hidden altar that looks like a small closet built into the wall. Since moving in, there has always been this odd energy in the air. Notably, our cats were terrified for weeks. Maybe not odd, cats hate change and usually take a while to adapt to a new location. The odd part is that they would just sit at a door and stare into the darkness for hours. To this day they are not comfortable and relaxed unless I and my partner are in the same room. Then it started happening. I and my wife at different times started to see a humanoid shadow. Usually standing in the doorways or the archway into the kitchen. I have insomnia as well, and sometimes I get out of bed and go into my office so as not to disturb my wife. She has told me that several times she has woken up and still felt that someone was in the bed, only to find out I was not there. I thought this was a little crazy until it happened to me. I woke up and felt like my wife was curled up behind me. I believed she was still in bed and even rolled over to kiss them, only to find the bed empty. I cannot express how strongly I felt that my wife was present that night. She was in the office after not being able to sleep. Then one night we are lying in bed, and at the end of the bed the springs pop, and it sounds like someone either stepped onto the bed or sat up from the bed. Mind you, the bed is a hybrid and very new, so I don't believe it was a matter of a spring getting stuck. Another night we are watching a movie with the door open. The cats are lying down with us in the office. In the corner of my eye, I see a shadow moving quickly towards the bathroom and out of view. Odd. Maybe I was just seeing things. I look back at my wife, and she is pale. She asked me if I was okay because I looked pale as well, then proceeded to tell me they saw a shadowy figure standing in front of her altar, then quickly moved towards the bathroom. I admitted to her that I had seen the same. We were both spooked and had to leave the apartment and get out for a bit. When we returned, things were calm. Later in the week I used the restroom, washed my hands, and closed the door. As I walked towards my room, the bathroom door made the opening sound and creaked open. I quickly got back into bed and went to sleep. Since this, my partner and I have continued to see the bathroom door open and close, and we have heard loud crashes and bangs when our cats are sitting in the same room with us. This apartment is older and was built in the early 70s. Even though my wife is a witch and practices witchcraft, they have not practiced for several months. Could this be someone that died? Something angry at my wife's altar? Or maybe something else? It doesn't seem dangerous yet, and for the most part we ignore it and try to not give it attention. It's also odd to me that it seems to always be in doorways. I have zero idea what I'm dealing with. My husband and I bought a townhouse back in September 17, and we've had super weird things happen since. Most of these experiences have happened on our second story. For background, where the stairs come up, my office is immediately to the left, then there is a long hall to the right with the hallway bathroom, the laundry room just past that, my son's room on the other side, and the master bedroom at the very end of the hall. The access to the attic is in the master bedroom closet. As our family goes, it's me, my husband, our son, and our 2 large dogs. When we first moved in, our son was only 2 or 3 years old and had just started making full sentences. He would be playing all day without any issues, but whenever it started to get dark outside, he started getting nervous and wouldn't want to be in his room. He had come downstairs at one point, saying, "Mommy, do you hear it?" "Hear what, kiddo?" "The baby's crying, Mommy." Since my son is an only child, you can understand why I was confused by this situation. I came upstairs with him, and I asked him where he was hearing it from, thinking he might be hearing the neighbors through the walls. He took my hand and pulled me towards the master bedroom, stopping just short of the threshold. He pointed to the darkest corner of the room and said, "Over there, the baby is crying over there." My body went numb at this, but I tried to brush it off and told him that there is no baby and he's just imagining it. This persisted for about a month before he finally stopped talking about the crying baby. During this time, I had been doing research on our house, and there had been no deaths in the house that I could find, let alone any kids that lived in the house before us. A few weeks after my son stopped mentioning the baby, I started hearing scratching noises right above my bed in the attic. I told my husband, and he thought we had a raccoon or some other animal in the attic. He went up a few days later, and there was nothing. I'm normally a heavy sleeper, but at least twice a week I would wake up to a faint scratching noise right above me. I did my best to ignore it and just go back to sleep. This seemed to work, as we hadn't had an issue for a while up until recently. I have always felt uneasy on the second floor, but I just attributed it to my past paranormal experiences growing up and being a little paranoid. Now I'm thinking my senses were on point. A few months ago my husband and I were talking about how our son had this weird affinity for the crying baby when he was younger, and I had mentioned that one day when I was taking a nap, I woke up abruptly to being sideways on the bed with one leg hanging off towards the closet, almost like I was being dragged towards it. However, I don't remember being pulled at all, and I do flop around a lot in my sleep, so I brushed it off. After I told my husband about this, he frowned a little bit and said he had a weird experience too recently. Apparently, he woke up one morning around 2:33 a.m. and saw a figure standing by his side of the bed. He said it was all black, and he couldn't really make out a face or any distinct features. He went to kick the figure, thinking someone may have broken into the house, and his foot went right through the figure. This freaked him out a little, but he is a firm believer that if you don't acknowledge paranormal things, they can't do anything. So of course he rolls over and goes back to sleep and doesn't even think to mention it to me until I tell him about my experience. The whole time we have been here, the dogs will randomly get spooked or will stare at something that I don't see. Every once in a while our wolf hybrid, who is typically scared of his own shadow, will get very upset, and his hair will stand on end, and he will emit a low but vicious growl. Our other dog is a Malinois/Black Lab mix, but she is getting old, 10 years old now, and doesn't really do much other than sleep on her bed and try to get all the pets and treats from us. And this brings us to the present. Yesterday, there was a decent storm that came through our area. It was semi-dark out and there was thunder every once in a while. I am working from home during the virus pandemic, and my mom had come to pick up my son at around 11:30 a.m. so I can work in peace without my son continuously bothering me. A few hours later, I'm listening to a podcast while working, and I hear a faint mumble that almost sounded like mommy. The chilling thing is that it sounded exactly like my son. I turned around to tell him that he needed to go back to his room and not to bother me while I was working, but as I was turning around, I remembered that he wasn't even home. I was here by myself with the dogs. There was no one behind me and no one down the hall. At this point, I try to brush it off, thinking my mind is playing tricks on me, when my wolf hybrid starts losing it. All his hair goes up, he gets between me and the door, and starts doing his low growl. This freaked me out a little bit, but I told him to stop, which he did, and he laid back down but without taking his eyes off the hallway. About an hour later, I was focused on work and chatting with a coworker in our team chat. They sent me something funny enough to make me audibly laugh. I then heard a tiny giggle that sounded exactly like my son coming from his room down the hall, who still isn't home at this point. I nearly fell out of my chair at this point with how scared I was. I got up and checked all the rooms upstairs, but I was home alone like I thought. I had to return to work as we were getting busy, but I was anxious and straining to hear if anything else was happening behind me. About 10 minutes later I hear the crash of something relatively small but still loud downstairs. My dogs ran down the steps while I followed behind them. My PlayStation controller, which was originally on the charging stand behind the TV, was in the middle of the living room floor. This made my blood run cold, as we had not had anything physically moved yet, and I had a full-blown panic attack. I called my husband, who was already on his way home, and said he would be there soon. When he got home, everything seemed to stop. This all happened from about 2 to 4:30 p.m. in the middle of a little thunderstorm. I have looked into it, and from what I gather, when something can mimic voices like that, it's typically evil or demonic. Should I be worried? What do I do in this situation? I don't mean to scare my son, and we can't move. But I am extremely paranoid and scared to be home alone now. Any help is appreciated at this point. I don't even believe in the paranormal, but a curious thing just happened to me. Well, it's almost 9 p.m., it's already dark, and my parents are not at home. I was quietly in the kitchen listening to music with my headphones and eating something standing up. It all happened so fast. I turned my head slightly to the side, and I swear on my life I saw a person-sized figure a couple of meters away from me. I freaked out a little, but the thought came that it was my mother, only to realize that my parents are not at home. It all happened in a matter of a second, and when I looked again, there was nothing. To expand on that, what I saw during that instant was a blurred figure the size of an adult. I emphasize that it looked like a blur rather than something physical. It was white, and on the top of its body, on the head part, the blur was black. Do you understand? As if he had clothes from the neck down. and that's why there was a contrast between the color of the face and the clothes. It wasn't something I saw out of the corner of my eye. I saw it in the center of my vision for a slight moment. Right outside the kitchen door. The illumination ensured that there was no visual confusion. I just wanted to tell you. I'm not even scared now, I've already said I'm skeptical. But that moment was creepy. I thought some of you would enjoy the story. My experience yesterday. So yesterday my brother and I went up to Dartmoor for a bike ride. We got up there after an hour of cycling. We're both pretty quick. Anyway, we get up and decide to bike round the Tors for a while. It was good fun, it was a pretty sweet moment, as I hadn't seen him for almost a year, and the reason he did this with me was because I had to leave my job due to a full mental breakdown, and this made me prone to pretty intense hallucinations and dissociative episodes. This is important to the story, so I'm not just oversharing, lol. So eventually we stopped off for a break and came across this beautiful woods area full of some amazing plant life and great big trees, which where we live isn't something you see often. We decide to get closer, and eventually we realize it's a reservoir, so me being me didn't really fancy trespassing on such an important property. My brother, however, didn't seem too bothered and went sprinting in. I went in after him because the land is unpredictable, and, well, if you've ever been to a reservoir, you'd probably know the water is deep as shit and extremely dangerous. I find him, and he's examining what looks like a shelter of sorts. It's made completely with trees and sticks, and it's pretty decent. The grass beneath it was completely dry. I urge my brother to get out of here because it's getting dark and we need to get back home. He agrees, but we at least decide to explore a little. After exploring some of the woods surrounding the place, I get my usual paranoia, but of course, with my illness, I brush it off. But eventually, like I feared, I saw something ahead of us peeking behind a tree. Now, like I said, I suffer from intense hallucinations, so I try my coping strategies and calm myself down. I don't say anything about it, I just push on. We carry on walking, and then the worst thing happens. My brother and I hear twigs snapping and leaves crunching behind us. We both freeze as we shit ourselves, thinking we've been caught by someone, and we both start coming up with an excuse or a plan to escape. It gets closer and closer until eventually it's pretty much a turn away from us. Then it stops, we can't hear anything apart from the sound of our breath and my heartbeat. Then we hear it again. This time it's fast, so we bolt. We have to go a full 180 degrees around the woods to get back to our bikes. After struggling, we both stopped and just decided to stay and own up and apologize to whoever was trying to catch us. That's when they stop as soon as I turn around. I shouted hello and we know we shouldn't be here, and we are leaving, just don't call the coppers, mate. We're just a pair of idiots who got too curious. No answer. I again shouted, hello? Eventually I get concerned and try and find whoever it was in case they've hurt themselves chasing us. Literally no one is in sight, not even a hint of anyone chasing us. Then I see the figure in the distance standing just behind a tree, not directly up against the tree but like just behind it so as to try and see me but conceal itself. I again try and shout over to this person, and then he goes behind the tree, and I start to grow a bit more scared than I was initially. If this was someone who wanted to get two trespassing teenagers off the land, why would they hide when I call out to them upon spotting them? Of course, being a little unsettled, I tell myself it may be another hallucination. My brother then says, what the duck is that person doing? My heart sinks a little when I realize he's seeing it too. I decide to just make our way as quietly as possible back to the gate. About halfway we hear him again. This time he's closer, and we get a better look at him. He's tall, like taller than me, and I'm 6'2", so this guy's definitely like 6 feet 4 inches, possibly bigger. I don't know, he was still not close enough to tell, and he was crouching. He was also pale, like really pale, he stuck out like a sore thumb amongst the trees. He had no identifiable features, bald as an egg, no eyebrows either, just 2 sunken holes with some dark eyes, maybe brown or hazel. I couldn't really tell what he was wearing, all I knew was I just wanted to leave. This ducker kept skulking round the trees. My brother and I stopped and just kept looking in front of us as we maintained our peripheral vision on him. He was moving around the outside of the trees almost as if he thought he'd managed to sneak up on us, and after losing my nerve, I took off running, and my brother soon followed. We got to the gate, and I practically leapt over it. My brother was not far behind, but he started yelling, saying, holy shit. The person was, in fact, trying to catch up with him. We got on our bikes and bombed straight down the banks and back to where we started, not before I stupidly turned back to see this tall white figure staring off at us from the gate we managed to hop over in time. My brother, who's usually pretty brave, was literally shaking, and he looked over at me and said, "Whatever he is, he's barely human." Of course, seeing the humor in the situation, I laughed at him, to which he got upset. I thought it was a story I needed to tell now that I know it was real and not in my head. What do you guys think? I'm told this is a community with a pretty open mind, and I can tell you not a single part of this is made up or exaggerated, just exactly how we both remember it. I myself can't back up what my brother said, as I really only saw the fellow from a distance, and, well, while he was unsettling, I think his physical attributes just seemed that way because he was acting odd. Furthermore, the place isn't far from a prison, possibly 10 miles, so it's probably just a homeless former convict. Please let me know what you guys think. If any more details are required, please let me know. I have loads of weird stories of my time living on Dartmoor as a kid, from me and from my parents. If anyone would like to hear some more, please ask, because there's one in particular I'd like to solve with some history of the moor. Any knowledge would be appreciated. Clarification: someone told me I should share this here. I don't believe in the paranormal, but I'm trying to have an open mind. And as always, stay safe on Dartmoor. Last night I couldn't sleep at all, which is fairly normal since I work graveyard shifts and it's turned me into a night owl. So even on my days off, I'm usually up all night long. So I'm up in bed watching a rom-com, laughing and in a great mood, and I decided that I deserve to treat myself to the occasional drink. My bar is in my basement, which is fully finished and furnished. It's pretty much a man cave. I've spent entire nights down there by myself or with the gang, and nothing strange has ever happened. So anything creepy or weird down there was absolutely the furthest thing from my mind. I finish laughing my butt off and head down there. I go behind the bar, pour myself a drink, and head upstairs. But as I'm on the second to last step to the first floor, from behind me I hear "Hey!" coming from downstairs in the middle of the basement. It was an older man's voice, in their 50s, I think. I know the house is empty except for me. And it scared the absolute shit out of me. I looked down there, and nothing moved, no one spoke or came forward, and I freaked the duck out. I jutted up the last 2 steps and slammed the basement door closed. I'm wondering, did I imagine that? Is there someone in my house? And as I stand there panicking, I hear the same man's voice coming from down in the basement but muffled by the door. By the intonation, he asked a question. Then continued to talk right after. He was talking to me. The question sounded something like, "Where are you going?" I couldn't make much out, especially what he said after that, but I was panicked, adrenaline pumping, and said, "Duck this shit, someone broke into my house." I ran into the next room, grabbed my flashlight and my handy-dandy baseball bat, and headed the hell back down there. Silence. Just silence. Slowly, I turned on every light in every room down there, ready to bash some homeless man's head in. I'm sorry to all the homeless people, but nothing. Every nook and corner checked, and the basement is completely empty except for my panicking and heavily breathing ass. I noped the duck out of there, locked myself in my bedroom, and spent the next hour in crisis mode checking my basement cameras, which showed nothing and no one except for me pouring myself a drink and then coming back down there and running around like a madman with a bat a minute later. I went down to the basement this afternoon after I woke up, with my trusty bat in hand, and rechecked the whole place. I found nothing. No one. Just me questioning both my sanity and reality. I know what I heard. That person was pretty loud, and he was talking in my direction and at me. Even through the door I heard him talking down there at me up the stairs. It seemed like he was trying to have a conversation with me. I've never had any kind of break-in, this is a very safe neighborhood, or any kind of remotely strange experience down there in my 15 years here. Does stuff like this happen to people out of the blue, or am I finally losing my ever-loving mind? I don't know what to do now. I don't really believe in the paranormal, but I had a very weird experience in 2004 that I have no explanation for. I don't intend to offend those who hold such beliefs, and while I'm open to the idea of the supernatural, I find it arrogant to assert definitively that it doesn't exist. I'm not a true believer in ghosts, monsters, alien visits, or similar phenomena. That said, my parents and I had a series of weird experiences throughout 2003 and 2004, maybe reaching into 2005, the year I graduated high school. I just barely found out about this channel and thought people here might be interested in hearing about one of them. I remember this clearly. I told the story to my older brother and my parents the day it happened and a number of times since to both family members and friends. It was in spring, after school one day, and I was home alone. My dad had mentioned that my older brother, who didn't live there, might be stopping by to grab something out of the shed in the backyard, so not to be freaked out if I saw someone back there. When the doorbell rang, I thought it was him, But I also thought it was a bit strange that he didn't just let himself into the backyard through the gate. I was a little annoyed that I had to stop what I was doing to let him in. But when I answered the door, there was no one there. At first I figured he must have gotten tired of waiting for me to answer and gone around, but just as I was closing the door to go look in the backyard, I heard the doorbell ring again. We had a doorbell in the front and the back, and they made slightly different noises. The back door chime always clicked at the end. And that's what I heard the second time the bell rang, meaning the ringing was from the back door. I was trying to remember if it had clicked the first time, thinking maybe my brother had been in the back all along. I wasn't sure, but I really didn't think so. The different sound is fairly distinct. It was at this point that I started to feel uneasy. Even though I still thought it must be my brother, something didn't seem right. In my parents' kitchen, you could see the back porch leading up to the door, where the back doorbell was, plainly through the window. There was an old woman there, wearing fairly stereotypical, lacy, old lady clothes. She was hunched over but didn't seem frail or incapable at all. She flashed me an aggressive, toothy grin and locked her eyes onto mine. I couldn't tell if the grin was malicious, impish, or playful, but it wasn't the look of someone who'd accidentally wandered into my backyard. I had the impression of being toyed with, especially since I'd been expecting someone, my brother, to be in the backyard. It felt almost like this was all happening as a way to play with my expectations, if that makes sense. I had to take my eyes off the porch to answer that door, but only for a half second. When I opened it, she was gone. A minute or two later, certainly not much more, my brother did ring the front doorbell, and I told him what had happened. As a side note, it was weird that he came to the front door instead of going around to the back on his own, and again I felt briefly like the woman, or what had appeared to be a woman, had known he would do that, like it was part of the game. I was terrified the day of, especially because my mom had been complaining about some unexplained, spooky stuff going on around that time that I'd largely written off as not real. Even though I'm not a believer in these things as they are typically defined, I'll admit it was quite strange. I'd love to know what people's legitimate theories are on what happened to me, and I promise to be respectful of your answers and discussion. I'm very curious what people who are invested in this kind of thing think about this. A disturbing Ouija board experience from long ago. So this happened when I was in high school several decades ago. At the time, I had zero interest in anything paranormal. I was heavy into science and all things logical. Anyway, in the 11th grade, I switched high schools to one closer to home. On my second or third day there, a student walked up to me that I did not know and introduced himself. I was new, and he was cool to me, so we made friends right away. So we started hanging out, me and his other friend, who was also a nice guy. We were kids just doing normal teenager stuff. Anyway, one evening while hanging out at my friend's house and listening to music, he told me that he knew I was coming to their school. Intrigued, I asked how he knew that. He said that their Ouija board told them I was coming. I asked how long ago it told them that, and even though I don't remember his exact reply, I remember that it was longer than even I knew I was going to change schools. Odd. So naturally, I am in complete disbelief about any of this Ouija nonsense and even told him that. So he and his friend pulled it out and started using it in front of me. Now understand, they are sitting on his bed using it. I am on the other side of the room sitting down. Then he asks me to ask it something. So determined to show them how silly this Ouija nonsense was, I began asking it questions that those two would have absolutely no way of knowing. Deeply specific things about my family. Dates, names, places, etc. This was before the internet, and these were just normal teenagers like myself. So I know they didn't have this information. Since I wasn't even close to it and they were the ones touching it. I thought I would totally trip it up. To my astonishment, it answered every single question I posed to it with 100% accuracy. My friends kept looking up at me when it would answer to gauge my reaction. I remember getting goosebumps all over my body. I could not believe this was actually happening. Somehow, there was something behind the device that knew all that stuff about me. To this day, I still wonder about it. What it was. How did it know? Especially how I knew I would change schools before I did? To this day, I won't allow one in my house. I don't know what force is behind them, but I think it is best left alone. I bought my first home when I was 22 and my son was 4. My then boyfriend and his mother, a former sheriff's deputy, moved in with us shortly after. I'm used to having paranormal experiences, as it tends to run in my family. My boyfriend knew this but was a huge skeptic. That is until his mother had an experience she never forgot. My boyfriend was located in his man cave, which was my converted garage. I was back in my room after putting my son to bed for the night. My boyfriend's mom, we will call her Ruth, was in the living room playing games on the computer with her friends. I heard her say loudly, "Go to bed." I didn't think anything of it, assuming she was joking around with my boyfriend. I heard her talking to her friends, laughing, and saying things like "good game." Then I hear this loud slap and her yelp. Then she screamed, "Go to bed." I heard her get out of her chair and come thundering down the hallway. I see her standing at my son's bedroom door, which was open, and just looking confused as heck. "What's wrong, Ruth? What was that noise? Did you drop something? Has he been asleep this whole time? He didn't just run back here?" "No, he's been asleep for about an hour. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." She said she was sitting at the computer desk, facing the wall, with her back to the hallway, when someone tapped her on the head. She had thought it was my son and told him to go to bed. Then, a while later, she was smacked in the back of her head, which is what I heard, and then I heard footsteps retreat down the hallway. She then asked if I would go out to the living room with her, which I did. She started playing her games again, and I sat on the couch, which had a view of the hallway and the kitchen, and read a book. About an hour goes by, and Ruth says, "Someone just touched my hair." So I start trying to look at the hallway and kitchen area while reading my book. Not long after, I see a small blonde boy, but just the top of his head, go from the hallway to the kitchen. Now my son is blonde, so I get up to put him back to bed. I walk into the kitchen and see no one. Not a single soul. Ruth calls from the living room, "Is he hiding or did you catch him?" I had to go back and tell her he wasn't there. We then go down the hallway to my son's room, and there he is, passed out in his bed. I didn't know that a 75-year-old woman could run as fast as she did to fetch my boyfriend. My boyfriend has no choice but to believe when he sees his mother's testimony and the fear on her face. From that night on, it was like a gate opened in that house. Ruth had many experiences, my boyfriend came face to face with his own, and even after they left, the statements continued. Like I said, I'm used to it. These things have always happened around my family, but I guess it can be too much for some people to handle. I'm still in contact with my ex, and he still discusses the things that happened in that house. His mother has passed on, but I don't think she ever really left. First and foremost, I can feel people's emotions. This means that I can sense their sadness, happiness, or anger. Which makes relationships hard because I have to consciously differentiate. But my experiences with the paranormal. 5 years old. Mom and I moved into the basement of our house so her friend, who has 2 daughters, could move in with us. My room was at the bottom of the stairs. I had been asleep for a while, and Mom was also asleep in the other room. I heard the stairs creak. I assumed one of them was coming downstairs to do laundry. I saw 2 elderly people I'd never seen in my life. They turned into the other room where the laundry was. 4 years later we were living in Boise with another one of my mom's friends. I saw a photo on the wall of the people I had seen. I asked who they were. They were the mom and dad of the lady who moved in with us years before. And they had passed away before she had moved in with us. I described the clothes I saw, which included the man's favorite shirt and the woman's favorite nightgown. At 8 I saw my grandpa at the end of my bed. It was calming. He was smiling. I discovered that he had passed away the following morning. I often stayed at my grandma's before and after. I slept on the couch there, and his chair was across the room. After he had passed, his chair would rock at night. I'd hear him moving around. Hear the fridge open. Hear a Pepsi, his favorite soda, open. Just randomly through the night and sometimes in the day. I talked to my grandma about it. She knew he was still there. He had passed in their bed. Years later, 1819, I had a tough event with my dad and drove to my grandma's house. She had passed away a few years prior. My aunt was living there, but no one was home. The door was unlocked, and I went in. I lay on the couch crying and then felt totally at ease. I heard my grandma's cuckoo clock, which wasn't in the house anymore, and grandpa's chair rocked. I grabbed his blanket that he always used. My aunt got home later and saw my truck. She asked how I got in. I said, "The front door." She said she locked the door and deadbolt before she left. At age 11 I dreamed the lady's daughter, who we lived with and drove an ambulance, she was an EMT, was going to get in a serious collision. I told the lady we lived with, and she told her daughter, who stayed home. Sure enough, it got hit by another vehicle in an intersection, and one of her coworkers as well as one of the passengers of the other vehicle died. At 16 I was working in a bowling alley. We were closed, and the front desk people were counting the till. The maintenance guy was oiling, and I was cleaning at the other end. 50 Lane House, I saw someone run along the wall to the back. Looked like a kid. I yelled for them to stop and went to get the manager. We looked but couldn't find anyone. The back door has an alarm and would have gone off. He checked security cameras, and there's me on camera. You see my head turn and yell, but there's nothing there. At 19, my girlfriend and I were leaving the house. It was in farmland next to a potato sorting facility. 10 at night. I was opening the car door for my girlfriend, and a man appeared to be walking towards us from the direction of the facility. He was 10 feet from speaking Spanish and seemed emotionally distressed. I stepped between him and my girlfriend in full fight mode. And he disappeared. My girlfriend was truly frightened. Because she didn't see anything or anyone. Later that next morning they found a man's body in the facility. At 21 I was living back with my aunt in Illinois. I had a dream about the first love of my life, who had stayed with us a bit in high school. Happy memories. I smelled White Castle, where she worked at the time, and just remember feeling super happy. The next morning a friend I hadn't seen since high school rang the front door. I knew immediately it was Jenny. I said it before he said it. And he said, "How did you know?" I told him my dream. The man she cohabited with had ended her that night. My dad passed from ALS when I was 29. I would give a lot to have had a moment with him. But I didn't until I was 36. My fiancée, her dad, and I were in Lake Tahoe. In the Airbnb, on the fireplace mantle was this monkey with symbols in each hand. I remarked that my dad had something just like it. My fiancée had gone to get some food, and I used that moment to ask her father permission to ask her to marry me. The moment he said yes, that damn monkey started clapping his symbols together. I've saved 3 people's lives. I've interacted with numerous presences. It's been fascinating. I won't go to haunted places. I don't watch scary movies, primarily haunting and possession. I keep my dog with me all the time when I'm alone. And I have a blanket my grandma made me that, as long as it stays on me at night, no bad things happen. So it travels with me everywhere I go. I'm 40 now. And things have continued. But it's mostly all awful stuff. My wife has experienced it to an extent. I scream in my sleep, feeling as though every muscle in my body is strained. Tears are coming out of my eyes. But I'm not asleep. I'm awake, and there's a dark entity pinning me. Each time a bright light shines in the room, like pure white light, and it goes away, and I can wake up. I've had scratch marks, bruises, etc. She is excellent at soothing me. She will turn on a light and notice that my blanket is on the floor. She will pick up the blanket and place it over me. She doesn't understand it. But I don't either. I've explained my experiences to her. I haven't remembered a dream in 2 years, since I started antidepressants. I don't believe in a heaven or a hell. But something is after death for some. Maybe all. Some experiences are positive, while others are negative. I've been told that there have been other people in my family's history who have claimed similar things. I've met one other person like me who I believed. So, that was long-winded. But it's been my life. Or a glimpse into some of it. There is an old Masonic temple in Winnipeg, Manitoba. It has been many things since, but for a while it was a semi-fancy restaurant named Mother Tucker's. So there are serious rumors that are dedicated to the building. You can Google that yourself, but I was a cook there an eon ago, and we had a pair of dishwashers from, I think, Somalia, and they were very Christian and very religious but not very talkative about it. There was a small door with a million coats of paint to the basement where we would put empty milk crates or bread trays for pickup on the next delivery. Creepy as hell, no lie. One day I was taking down a stack of bread trays, and it felt like I walked into the freezer. That's it. No noises, no visuals, but I swear the temperature was freezing, and I saw my breath. I got the hell back up the stairs and bugged out. 2 weeks or so later, one of these dishwasher dudes goes down there with some milk crates. We hear him moments later shouting and screaming and pounding at the door. This waiter grabs the door handle and pulls on it, like hard. It won't budge, but know this, the handle never moved. Due to the old and historical building's angle, the door always closed on its own, and the latch was buried 30 coats deep in paint. You could just pull it open and walk away, and gravity would close it tight, but the knob was fixed, and there was no closure or clasp or anything to prevent you from opening it. Back to our dishwasher? The door closed behind him, as it always would. The hotline in the kitchen is 8 feet away. He starts screaming. A bunch of us run to the door and try to open it. Won't budge. He's screaming at the door, and we can't pull it open. Is he pulling on it at the same time, and adrenaline gives him the strength to keep us out? Great theory. However, he's pounding on the door like a madman. It's hard to pull the doorknob when you're pounding and clawing at the door. 15 long seconds later the door opens and we fall to the floor like a Jerry Lewis skit. This poor guy pulls off his apron and runs out the back door. Sent his buddy for his paycheck and wouldn't talk about it to anyone. He was screaming all the way out the back door, but I don't speak his native tongue. His cousin/brother/buddy quit a week or so after. The place was for sale the last time I checked. This happened 24 years ago. Am I really haunted? Okay, so to start off, I'm going to say two things. I'm a young woman, and to be honest, yes, I have a vivid imagination, and second, some of these stories aren't mine. I don't even know why I'm sharing this, but I digress. To give some backstory into my level of belief in spirituality, since I was young, a lot of my family have had vivid dreams. Seeing people that have passed away and figures in our rooms was a common morning conversation topic. Along with that, the seeing the future dreams so many kids have. In particular, I've been told mine were the worst and still are. I suffer from insomnia, and due to this, I tend to have a bunch of night terrors and, worst of all, sleep paralysis. The most common figure I see is this particularly grotesque figure, looming in my room. It always starts the same. Just as I begin to drift off, I feel the heaviness, the inability to shift my body or even twitch a finger, and I am just about able to flick open my eyes. Then, the tap, tap, tap of a liquid hitting the floor in random intervals. For some reason, I always look up, my senses muffled by the sound of almost muffled screams. He's there every time. It's a full-grown man, fully naked and bare. Now this would be scary enough for a young woman, but the part that always gets me is his head. It's like the figure had just slaughtered a goat, using its head as a mask. The dripping? The goat's face was dripping with blood. To be fair, sleep paralysis is easily explainable, so I'm not worried, but the other stories I have just get more surreal. The one that sticks out the most, that I tell at sleepovers or to the kids I babysit, is this time I was home alone. For reference, I didn't know I was home alone, and being a brooding teenager, I had spent the majority of my day sitting on my laptop and phone, watching hours of mindless internet videos and movies. We moved into this house in 2021, and this took place a year later in the summer of 22, so I was 14, almost 15. My bed at the time was a loft bed, basically a bunk bed, but instead of another bed underneath, I had space for a desk to be pushed to one side and storage space that I never used. This bed was tall, I'm 5 feet 9 inches, and had I sat up abruptly, I would have bumped my head on the ceiling. It had just gotten dark enough that I decided it was time to leave my dungeon and grab something to eat before going straight back to my filthy Frank videos. I remember sitting up in the dark, pausing my video, and rubbing my eyes. This may sound silly, but you know when you rub your eye and it almost makes that rushing sound? Yeah, well, I thought I heard something, but of course I assumed it was someone downstairs. I closed the laptop, and my dark room no longer had any illumination of any kind. Just as I was grabbing for my phone to use the torch, I heard it. The sound was as clear as day. It sounded like a grown man under my bed whispering my name. I had frozen but decided, no, it must have been my older brother, just trying to mess with me like always. Again. My name, now clearer, almost at speaking volume. I freaked out, wide-eyed but not moving until I willed my legs to push me from where I was sitting upright, at the top of my bed, to the bottom, where I swung my legs over the side and dashed down the stairs, searching for my dad. I went downstairs, out of breath, and heard no movement anywhere in my house, even my dog wasn't inside. Panicking, I grabbed a knife and held it extended in front of me while dialing my dad's phone number. When he picked up, I whispered what had happened, and he told me I was completely home alone, my brother was at his friend's, and my younger sister was at a birthday sleepover. He was at least a 3-hour drive away, and he told me to call my brother. When I rang my brother, he didn't pick up. No one was taking me seriously. So I did the only logical thing. I went back upstairs, flicking on lights as I went, still holding my knife. I checked every room, every lock, and every window. No one could have gotten in. After calming myself, I fell asleep on the couch that night with the sitting room door locked and the knife at my side. I know it shouldn't be as terrifying as I think it is, but I tried my best to describe it without making this sound fictional. I have a plethora of stories, but I'll tell this one as the last one for today. Now this isn't from my perspective, so I can't describe too much, but please bear with me. About 2 years ago, my brother, who is now 23, and my sister, who is now 14, were alone together. My brother is 6 feet 0 inches, goes to the gym, and gets in fights on nights out. He's not really the sort of guy to get spooked. I and my siblings have a really strong bond and have since I was around 9, when my mom passed away, relying on each other. So of course, we hang out in each other's rooms, sometimes sitting in on my brother playing whatever game he's currently obsessed with and talking shit. We'll call my siblings E, 23, and D, 14. As they were laughing, D groaned and said something about my annoying laugh being heard across the house. My brother's room is on the other side of the house, my room is over the kitchen, and his is over Dad's room. He agreed, and they yelled for me to shut up, saying I'm always talking and laughing on the phone. Apparently I just kept laughing, so annoyed, D stood up and stormed over to my room. When she opened the door, no one. I was at a sleepover that night even if they didn't know that. She called my brother in, and they agreed to call me. When they called me, I picked up and asked in a playful way what they wanted. E seemed shocked and told me to stop hiding. I responded by turning on my camera, showing my friend's sitting room. He hung up a moment later, and I didn't get an explanation until the next day. Safe to say my siblings don't like my room. It doesn't help that I literally scream bloody murder in my sleep, so they've been joking since then that I'm like possessed. An American backpacker told me crazy paranormal stories. And then something happened to me. Hi there. I felt the need to tell this crazy story that happened to me some time ago. A few years ago, when I was 20, I met an American backpacker at a bus station in Paris. His name was Lucas, and he was 27. We had some spare time before our bus, so we settled down and began our conversation. He had a passion for adventure, spending 6 months in the US, first in his hometown of Montana, where he lived with his mother, and then spending another 6 months traveling the world, either on foot or by sailboat, as he was a sailor. He told me he was a marine engineer, but more specifically, he developed various types of ropes used for navigation. We clicked pretty well, so we exchanged Facebook contacts and stayed in touch. It was quite an unexpected encounter, because this person had tons of adventure stories, and he came from the US, which, for a little European like me, sounded really exotic. I felt like I was meeting someone who lived in an adventure movie, a world full of mysteries and fiction, where crazy things always happen. Back then, I had just started university. I didn't have many friends, it was winter, and I was in a new city. I wasn't really someone who liked going out at night or to concerts yet, so I spent most of my time at home, listening to music, watching series, drawing, and playing video games. Lucas and I talked regularly. He was back in the US then, and due to the time difference, we started talking late at night. Occasionally I wouldn't go to bed until 3 a.m. or even later. He would tell me about his adventures. Every day, he had a new story. During a solitary mountain trek, he confronted a pack of coyotes and had to fire his pistol to escape. I thought his life was totally crazy. But as the stories went on, things started to feel stranger and stranger. Like I said, he was a sailor. He told me he often sailed from Florida to the Caribbean. Sometimes he took people with him, sometimes he sailed alone. One day, he told me he'd met the Flying Dutchman. Initially, I erupted into laughter. But he was completely serious. So, half-jokingly, I asked him to go on. He described every detail, how the weather suddenly changed, how this huge dark ship he was approaching didn't show up on his radar. He said his initial reaction was to think it was a drifting ship, that something went wrong with the boat crew, so he went closer. The ship looked ancient. He didn't see anyone on board, but he heard music coming from it. I don't remember exactly what kind. In any case, he was alone, and he admitted he panicked. Something was very off with his ship. So he took the helm and moved away. But that was just the beginning of the crazy stories he told me. Thereafter, I didn't really know what to think of our conversations. It was the first time someone told me a paranormal story with such seriousness, and especially such a wild one. I was more fascinated than skeptical. Something about our connection was captivating. It was an escape from the somewhat dull reality of my small provincial town. We called each other almost every night, and he told me anecdotes about his life, most of them quite believable. Part of me told me not to believe his Flying Dutchman story, but I wanted to see how far he would go. I decided to postpone making up my mind until later. I wasn't averse to the paranormal. I had personally encountered strange phenomena in my youth. But my experience was a bit beyond the I hear weird noises in my attic at night level. 2. Do you know the Wendigo? I never heard of it until Lucas said he actually met it. One of his best childhood friends, whose name I forgot, was Native American. He came from a part of the US where traditions are still strong, or at least, there's a will to preserve them. But I don't know enough on the topic to talk about it. So he knew these kinds of folk stories pretty well. With this friend, they would go about once a year into nature, forests, mountains, to camp, hike. For a week or 10 days. One day, after 2 or 3 days of hiking in the forest, they decided to camp. They made a fire, ate, and then had a drink. Night was falling. They were in the middle of a talk when suddenly Lucas felt a presence around the fire. He saw a figure, a blurred body shape, sitting next to them. His friend gestured for him to look at him. He seemed to say no with his eyes, which Lucas understood as look at me, not at the figure. They looked at each other while trying to ignore this new presence. They were scared. His friend had tears in his eyes. It lasted a few minutes, then they realized the figure had disappeared. Later, they talked about the experience. His friend said it wasn't the first time he'd encountered a Wendigo. He cautioned Lucas against gazing at it, as the Wendigo thrives on the attention it receives. If ignored, it disappears. When he told me that, it was late at night. I didn't dare move. He even joked, "Ha ha, maybe the Wendigo is in your attic." At the time, I had a small attic in my apartment, and I remember feeling really uneasy. I had trouble falling asleep. I stayed awake until morning. Hearing someone saying these kinds of stories with that much sincerity was very unsettling. Here is the last part of my story. 3. Like I said, Lucas partly lived with his mother in a town in Montana in an old house built during colonial times. He told me this house was haunted. But he always talked about it very calmly, as if it were normal and part of everyday life. He said he and his mom always knew the house was haunted, and paranormal events were part of their routine. He meant you must accept it and honor the souls who lived there before you. According to him, it was a matter of balance. He said there was one place in the house where he really didn't feel well and where he no longer set foot. In the basement, apparently, when he was a kid, he'd felt a very hostile presence and even saw a face watching him in the dark. There was a kind of big black stain on a brick wall, and all the energy seemed to come from that wall. Since then, he tries as much as possible not to go down to the basement. Given his claim of haunting his house, I requested a video tour from him. It was night here and afternoon there. He showed me weird stuff. For example, he and his mother placed small bowls of salt all around the house, and there also were mirrors on the window sills. All that was linked to the house's energy, as I remember. He continued the tour and said, "Well, what often happens is that the lights turn on by themselves. Oh look, they're on now." So my mom and I got into the habit of turning them off as soon as we passed by. He entered the living room. He showed me a big solid wood sideboard and said the drawers were always left open, so they got used to closing them when they passed by. The drawers were indeed open, so he closed them. One drawer contained nothing but a Bible. I remember it being just a funny coincidence for me at the time. Anyway. At one point, he took me to a hallway. There was a trapdoor in the floor leading to the basement. That basement he said he was scared of. He didn't open the trapdoor but approached it to show me. And here comes the moment I'm trying to approach. When he got closer, the video on my phone started to crackle. Colored lines, blue and red, appeared on my screen, and the sound was completely distorted. The image was choppy, almost frozen, and I heard a heavy, low buzzing. When the image went back to normal a few seconds later, Lucas was in his bedroom. He had gotten scared and ran away. I said, "Did you see what just happened?" He said, "Yeah, it's the first time I've seen that." He didn't panic. I wouldn't say he was calm either, but not in shock. While I was terrified, my heart was racing, but my body was completely still. I just couldn't move. While it was happening thousands of kilometers from me, it felt so real. It was there with me. It really touched me to see him like this, unsettled by something. He was usually very impressive and confident, cool-headed, if I can say. He just said, "Well, I told you my house was haunted." Like if all of this was actually normal, see? At that moment, my thoughts were spinning. I thought back to all his crazy stories, this damn Flying Dutchman, this King Wendigo. I had always taken some distance with this stuff and tried to analyze it rationally. To be honest, I thought he was a bit eccentric, maybe a bit of a liar but harmless, and that his stories amused me without me having to necessarily believe them 100%. But then, I started to doubt. I wondered, what if all this is true? While he sat on his bed, in his room, and calm had returned, we started talking about something else. Suddenly, I heard a noise. At first, I didn't understand what it was, then it became clear, it was a voice. A very, very deep voice, almost inhuman, reciting something in a language I didn't know. I was studying linguistics at the time, and I was very interested in human languages. But this one was impossible to identify. If I had to compare, I'd say it sounded like a monk reciting a prayer. The tone was deep and monotonous, conveying a profound and solemn message. Lucas heard it too, but oddly, I think I heard it louder than he did. I asked him, "Do you hear that noise?" He said yes, then went toward the source. He got to his living room, and the sound came from his Bluetooth speaker, lying on the floor against a wall, charging. However, the speaker was not in use. He fiddled with the speaker, and the sound stopped. Then, barely a second later, I heard another voice, this time, a recognizable voice, in English. It was the TV, the news was on. I asked if the TV had been on before, and he said it turned on by itself. He turned off the TV, and nothing else happened after that. We kept talking occasionally. Then I met the person who became my ex at the time, so I changed my habits and started spending a lot of time with him. Naturally, Lucas and I drifted apart. But I still think about this story often. I just moved in with my dad, there's something bad here. Help me, please. My brother and I just moved into my dad's for a better opportunity in a new city. We have lived here for about 4 months now. Everything is great, but things are getting weird. I have 7 siblings in my house. One night, before we moved in, my dad's girlfriend's daughters decided to make an Ouija board. They said not much happened other than a few letters, and my dad made them destroy their creation. My brother and I don't believe in the paranormal too much, so we just laughed at it, but our viewpoints have changed since then. About 2 weeks ago, around 2 a.m., I was watching a movie in our downstairs living room. I was the only one awake, when I heard some footsteps upstairs. I didn't think anything of it other than maybe it was my dad going out for a smoke, but I didn't hear the front door. So, curious, I stood up and walked towards the stairs. To get to the stairs, you have to pass a bar that has a mirror. When I passed the bar, I looked into the mirror to see an 8 to 9 foot black figure behind me. I froze. When I froze, it walked into me and disappeared. I felt it. It was a weird feeling I can't explain. It was cold, but it was a different kind of cold. I told my dad about it in the morning, and he kind of just laughed it off. My brother didn't believe me much either. This is where it gets even weirder. 1 week ago, my brother and I were watching PewDiePie in our room, which is next to the downstairs living room and our sister's room, and we heard some knocks every 10 minutes or so. It was around 2 a.m. again, but we weren't too worried about it because we have 4 kittens and a cat. But our sister came into our room and told us to stop knocking because we woke her up a few times and she didn't want us to wake up the cats. Right after she said this, our door slammed and all the lights downstairs started flickering. We were terrified. We locked ourselves in my room, including my sister, and turned on our phone flashlights, but immediately after, our closet started opening slowly. We have sliding closet doors. They stopped halfway, and maybe 30 seconds later all my brother's Legos fell from the top shelf. He had, 12 medium-sized sets up there, and they shattered. We all decided to sleep in my sister's room that night. We didn't get much sleep, though. We told my dad about it in the morning. He was still skeptical. He thought we were pranking him, but he bought us some sage to burn in the room. This didn't help. Last night was the first night I've slept in my room since that incident, and I regret it. I was lying in bed, my brother was playing Rainbow Six upstairs, and I heard a giggle in the closet. My heart sank, and I went upstairs immediately and got my brother. He came down, and we investigated the closet. We found nothing, but he wanted to play more Rainbow. So, we both went upstairs until he wanted to go to bed. We went to bed around 1 a.m., and everything was fine. We were a little creeped out about sleeping in our room again but decided we probably should, and we went to bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, I want to say around 4 a.m., I felt a very cold feeling on my foot. I woke up and went to reach for my glasses on my dresser, but they were gone. Note: I'm blind without them. That's when the lights started flickering and the closet started opening slowly. I threw my pillow to wake up my brother, but it was like it hit a wall in the middle of the air and just dropped to the floor. The light stopped flickering, the closet door stopped opening, and everything was hushed. I felt something, though. I knew that I wasn't safe. The black figure emerged from the closet at the foot of my bed. He just stared at me. I was frozen. I couldn't speak or move, I could barely breathe. That's when my brother started sitting up slowly, making the same giggle noise I heard from the closet. He sat all the way up, and a few seconds went by before he turned his head, looked directly at me, and said something that I couldn't make out. It sounded alien, but it wasn't his voice either. Right after he did that, the black figure disappeared, the light turned on, and the closet slammed shut. My brother woke up to the noise, and so did nearly everyone else in the house. My brother tried talking to me, but I was too shaken to get a full sentence out. He got my parents, and they're going to get a priest in here tomorrow. I'll keep everyone updated, but I need help. I believe this is just the start to something very bad. Thank you for your time and any suggestions you may have. My boyfriend has an attachment. I had never experienced anything paranormal before I met my boyfriend. We met in October of 2024 and began dating in November. I ended up moving in with him into his apartment in January. I know it was very soon, but we were comfortable enough to do so, and it helped both parties' financial situations. My BF had never informed me that he believed he had an attachment before I moved in with him. One night we got into our first argument, and we had been sitting in the living room, and after I slightly raised my voice, the trash can in the kitchen, which was maybe 10 feet away with a wall dividing the two areas, fell over. It spooked me, and my boyfriend proceeded to apologize to me and informed me that stuff like that happens sometimes when things get upsetting, sometimes when nothing triggers it. Needless to say, of course I believe in the paranormal. I just hadn't experienced it like that. Now the part I haven't told you guys is that the argument with my boyfriend was about me and my best friend going to Target to buy an Ouija board that same day. He told me he doesn't duck with stuff like that, and I told him it's harmless, nothing bad could come from it. I was sorely mistaken. Now nothing bad came from the board we had purchased because after my boyfriend had informed me of his past with Ouija boards, my friend and I disposed of the board. When my BF was around 11 to 12, his childhood dog had passed away. He was obviously heartbroken, and he was kind of an odd kid from what I had gathered. He told me he was looking through the woods out by his house, playing with sticks and dirt, stuff that kids do at that age. When he happened upon an Ouija board. Now, from what I recall from the story, there was not a planchette. I'm not exactly sure what he would have used to use the spirit board, but as a heartbroken kid that just wanted to see his childhood dog again, he attempted to use it. He said he got a few words out, never told me what they said, but he never said goodbye. That is the story he told me that started it all. He would experience things in the home he lived in at the time that were unexplainable and not very nice. He even told me one time something pushed him down the stairs when he was home alone. He eventually moved out of that house before he reached junior high and moved to where his parents currently live. While I'm not sure if a ton of paranormal stuff happened while he was living there because he's never told me any stories of that house. When he moved out when he was 18, he would have stuff in his apartment that would move around but always assumed it was one of his roommates because he lived with two other guys. Fast forward to the apartment we live in now, he moved in there a little less than 2 years ago. He moved in with his close friend, who, like me, had no information regarding the fact that my BF might have a ghost. I hate calling it that, but whatever. My BF's close friend only lived there for about 9 to 10 months before moving back in with his mom. While my BF's friend told me it wasn't because of what was happening, my BF is pretty sure it was. My BF is a pretty unserious individual and likes to call this stuff ooga booga shit, but it's just paranormal activity. I'm not sure of the timeline of everything, but my BF said in the beginning of living in the apartment, he would come home to the coffee table turned upside down, the mirrors that were previously on the wall, they were cheap $20 mirrors that weren't very heavy, on the floor, and the papasan chairs they had in the living room, instead of a couch in true bachelor fashion, face down on the floor. When stuff like that started happening, he knew immediately that whatever it was not happy to be moving. His friend even informed me that through the mirror that they had hung up, you could see into the living room through his room, and he would see shadowy figures at around 2 to 5 a.m. almost every night that he would stay up. Eventually things stopped being moved when he would leave the house, and everything went back to what he thought was normal. When his friend moved out, one of his other friends moved in shortly after. Not aware of the things that had occurred, he told my boyfriend one night after living there for about 5 months that he would see people or shadow figures from his room through the same exact mirror. When I moved in, the activity had almost completely stopped by then, until the night we had that argument. While it was not very bad, sometimes the dishwasher door would slam on its own, or we would hear things in the kitchen while in the living room. We prayed over whatever it was, but it doesn't feel malevolent, so I never really bothered to talk to anyone about it. We are finally moving into our own place because that apartment is kind of a shithole, the rent was cheap, give me a break. Our washing machine had been leaking, so the landlord had to come and remove the machine and found subfloor damage and mold underneath it. Due to that, we decided to stay with my parents until we move into our new place next week. This caused a little bit of unhappiness in whatever is attached to my BF. We started staying here on Thursday night, it is now Sunday night, and more things have happened than in the 3 months that I was living in the apartment with him. My parents have a mother-in-law suite that we are staying in currently. It's pretty separated from the rest of the house with its own stairs that lead to a door outside, except for a door in the kitchen area that leads to a hallway with the laundry rooms and my sister's rooms. Around October of 2023, my parents suffered a really bad house fire that caused my whole family to be displaced until about a month ago, when the renovations had finished. Before I moved in with my BF, I was living in it while the rest of the house was still under construction. I was paying my parents about $1,000 a month for rent, which I could barely afford. Anyways, the electrical systems work great, everything's great, whatever. So the whole apartment area has dome lights that you can dim with a switch that has a dimmer built into it. When I was living here previously, I would dim the light all the way down and sleep with that. We started staying here, and on the first night I passed out pretty fast. The next night we were having dinner with my mom, and my BF and I were sitting at the dining table, and the medium-sized vase with glass pebbles in it, a pretty heavy object, moved 2 to 3 inches towards me. I see it out of the corner of my eye but don't say anything until I look up at my BF. He's giving me the straight-faced I didn't like that look. After dinner we go upstairs, and he immediately proceeds to tell me he has never had anything like that so obvious happen directly in front of his face. He explains it as though something was waiting for him to look at the vase so it could happen. He then proceeds to tell me that the lights in the room the night before would brighten and dim on their own. Like not just a little bit, like to the point where it was almost completely bright, and they would proceed to go back dark again. And of course, as we are having this convo, the fully lit lights start to dim. Not too much, but enough for us to notice. As if it is responding to what we are talking about. It is currently Sunday night at 2 in the morning, and I cannot fall asleep. The previous nights I had been working all day and didn't give a shit and just wanted to play video games and then go to bed. But now I am sitting in bed next to my asleep BF typing this up because about 2 hours ago I was sitting on the couch after getting out of the shower, with my towel still on, while my BF was in the bed, and the light started to dim and brighten again. Me being kind of a butt, I jokingly suggested that maybe the lights just do that. Not even a millisecond after those words exited my mouth, the lights came on fully bright. I'm scared, my heart is racing, and my boyfriend responds, maybe he didn't like your attitude. The lights go dark. I can feel my pulse in my fingers at this point. I do not know what to do, but my boyfriend definitely has something attached to him, and I'm not sure what it is, but I don't like it. I'm sorry I made this story so long, but I felt like it needed some backstory. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to sleep tonight because the lights have been dimming and brightening for the past 2 hours on their own. I've tried not to focus too hard on it, but it's just so scary. Paranormal experience. So this last weekend I stayed at the Rio Hotel in Guadalajara. We had a group of 14 friends all stay at the hotel. So on our last night there, around 4 a.m., I felt something grab my shoulder and shake me. I thought it was my wife who was lying next to me. I kept saying, "Yes, babe," as I had my back towards her, but she wasn't replying. So I figured she must have just gotten up to use the restroom. After a couple of seconds, I realized I didn't hear footsteps nor see the bathroom light turn on. So I turned to see her passed out snoring. Now that I'm wide awake, I can sense something in the hallway where the bathroom is located. I couldn't see or hear anything, but I could feel it. So I laid back down and closed my eyes. A couple minutes later I can feel someone staring at me. So I open my eyes, and I see a shadow of a woman with long hair standing by the hallway just staring at me. So I'm trying to figure out if there's furniture or some light giving it that shadow of a woman, and I couldn't see anything but can definitely see the woman staring at me. This lasted about a long minute. Once I couldn't figure it out. I got out of bed and sat on the side of my bed. As soon as I stood up, the shadow went to the corner of the ceiling, and the light flickered. I was so tripped out that I just went back to bed. The next morning I told my group of friends what happened. And one of my friends asked before I even mentioned a description, saying, "I saw her too." A woman with long hair was staring at me while I was packing. So now I know it's definitely not sleep paralysis. Why would it nudge me to wake up? Why did I and my friend both see her on different floors? Was it trying to tell us something? Can it be something my friend and I both have in common? I have never been a believer in ghosts and paranormal activity, but since my friend saw her too, it is what has me wondering. I'm terrified and don't know where to sleep tonight. I would appreciate thoughts and suggestions, but I write this because I just need to write now. It's too much for me to handle. I'm German and 19 years old. Luckily I will move out in October. Hopefully it will get better. I never really believed in ghosts, nor did I deny their possible existence. I still hold that belief, but I currently feel frustrated and helpless. It probably started either in the beginning of August or the end of July that my cat would avoid my room. The few exceptions were only for a few minutes, and she didn't seem to feel comfortable. But she didn't avoid me. When I was elsewhere, she would go to me, and if I came in the room, used to be my sister's, where she stayed when she wasn't outside, she purred and wanted to cuddle. I found it weird and was sad about it because I feel lonely and like her company. A thing I want to clarify for fairness sake, I started watching videos about paranormal stuff again in August. I do this every couple of years for a phase. That's how I found out about this channel. It probably affected me because for a few days I had a lot of shivers and was a bit scared sometimes. I'm sensitive and scared easily, which makes everything worse. So, the one August night started it all. Slightly before falling asleep, the weird state where you are half conscious, I always felt like I would stop breathing and therefore woke up, so to say, which I already had a few days before too. It was annoying and exhausting but also interesting for me because I'm suicidal, and this makes me realize I actually am a little bit afraid of death and don't actually want to die. Anyways, it happened a few times, but the last time I felt something warm around my neck. For me, it felt like a hand, but I could just have made this connection up, and my neck was just hot for some reason. But it disappeared the moment I woke up. Oddly enough, the lyrics "Nothing suffocates you more than the passing of everyday human events" from Marilyn Manson's The Fight song came to my mind the moment before, even though I rarely listened to Manson. As I already stated, I'm not a native speaker, and I thought, what does suffocate mean again? Ah, right, ersticken. It might be a coincidence, or it affected me in thinking I was being strangled. After the warm feeling disappeared, I heard a low-pitched sound. It somehow reminded me of a frog but probably didn't sound like it at all. The next day my cat tried to go into my room again but looked into the corner where I heard that sound and left again. The next night I obviously was scared, but not enough to tell anyone or to not be able to fall asleep in the room. I either was asleep or half conscious and had a dream. I think it was a usual Twitter tweet, and I scrolled down the comments. They were all pictures of pale, scary faces with bloodstains, but the last face wasn't on Twitter anymore. It felt like it was right above me, pressing his nose on mine and even moving it a bit. Even our lips were on each other. I opened my eyes, and nothing was there. Actually, I can't remember if I slept this night after this. I can't imagine me doing this, but I can't remember going elsewhere that night. I told my mother about it. I think she is a bit spiritual, but not over the top. Probably like me but a bit more on the spiritual side. We never mentioned words like ghost. But she said she wants to clean my room by using sage. I don't really like this idea, didn't tell her that, but she had been using it sometimes when I was younger. I hate smoke, but nevertheless, I always felt a bit better after she used it. Anyways, she suggested to me that I could either use the room that used to be my sister's or the bed on the other side of my room. My older brother used to sleep there and still does when he visits us. I chose the other bed but didn't feel comfortable. I always felt like in the other part of the room where I usually sleep, the room is halfway divided by props, not sure if it's the right word to use, there was something creepy and threatening. It was the wrong decision because I obviously was too afraid. But I was able to relax, but then I heard a sneeze behind me that sounded like it was coming from an animal. But it was enough for me to freak out and eventually leave the room and choose my sister's room. It probably was a raccoon or something, but it didn't sound like it came from above but like it was in the room. Until today, I slept in this room without many problems. I just feel a bit uncomfortable and not welcomed, probably because it's not my room. Additionally, the room is much darker because of the windows. My sister had a lot of stuffed animals and a few porcelain dolls that all are directed to look towards the bed. I hate it but can cope with that. I feel very safe if my cat is with me, but she likes to be outside, thus, it's not often the case. The only thing weird was that sometimes the motion detector lamp would go on for a second or third time after it was on because I walked by. A couple of hours ago I saw something, to me, terrifying that frustrates me a lot. I don't know what to do and where to sleep. I woke up for no reason and saw in the other corner of the room a flying, completely round face. It looked oddly similar to the anonymous mask for some reason. I know it sounds ridiculous, and I still can't believe it, and in 1 second I laugh at myself, but the next second it feels so real again and makes me shiver. I saw it so clearly for a few seconds, it wasn't blurred because I could hardly see anything, even though it should have been the case because it still was dark AF. It flew, looking down, but while flying, slowly turning in my direction. It looked like it would turn itself around automatically, usually making an endless circle. I wanted to close my eyes but couldn't stop staring at it. I was completely terrified and breathed very fast. I figured it was close to seeing me, and then it did and disappeared. After a short pause of shock and running thoughts, I grabbed my phone and went into the kitchen, where I started writing this. Before I started this paragraph, I talked to my mom because she went to the toilet. She really wants to find her sage now but doesn't know either what I should do tonight. She said to me what I thought about as well, even if it's not real, the fear is. As I started writing this, I still remember the face very clearly. Now my memory blurs. That's always a problem of mine. I will only remember my emotions for sure and forever. I just wanted to write it all down. Writing this gave me a sense of relief, despite the many shivers I experienced. I don't think anyone could help me, but honestly, I am interested in other people's thoughts about this. Something happened to me one night that defies explanation. So anyway, I'm a believer in the paranormal and the whole alien UFO thing, right? Due to seeing ghosts as a child and seeing 2 UFOs, I watched quite a lot on the subjects, but one night I was there, laid in bed, having a little drink too, and everyone knows that I can drink quite a lot, but this night I only have 3 cans to enjoy myself a little, and I'm watching some UFO documentary on YouTube whilst my curtains are shut, but I can't shake the feeling that something is outside my window, but I ignore it, carry on drinking, and watch the rest of the documentary, and later, fall asleep. This is when it messes with my head. I wake up in my sister's bedroom the morning after, a bedroom I'd never go into to sleep at all. My bed is better, all my entertainment is in my room, and well, why would I want to sleep in her bed? So I wake up, dazed and confused as to what the duck is going on. I walk out of the room and ask my mom why I've woken up in that room, and she looks at me and says, "I want to ask you the same question," so I'm there like, okay. Apparently, I walked towards my sister's room, opened her door, and told her she had to get out of her bed because I wanted to sleep in it. That confuses everyone. Me included. My mother inquired with my friends whether I have ever sleepwalked after consuming alcohol and subsequently fallen asleep. They all responded in the negative and expressed their confusion regarding the notion that I might have done so, a memory I do not possess. After reflecting on this, I began to conduct some research. Given my background in ufology and my familiarity with the subject, I started to entertain the possibility that I may have experienced an abduction. Perhaps the unusual sensation I felt was indicative of a presence outside, suggesting that something was indeed there. Of course I had a little joke about it, but to this day, it's been the strangest thing that has happened to me that I can't explain. I just needed to share it somewhere. 3 of my personal spooky encounters. I'm not going to lie, I'm one of those people who has had quite a few unexplainable things happen to them in their life, even from a young age. I don't think I have any kind of special connection to the beyond or anything like that. I'm just a really perceptive person. I can notice when even something small in a room I am familiar with has been changed, purely based on the vibes in the room being different than usual. I do not consider myself to be one of those individuals who fabricate stories for the sake of attention, as I am aware of a few such people. And if you knew me, you'd know that I don't just ignore weird sounds or write things off as my imagination. I'm hypervigilant, some say paranoid, and will investigate and try to find explanations for the unexplainable. These stories are just a few of the ones I haven't been able to explain. 1. Bathroom ghost. At my elementary school, my classmates and I would often joke about a haunted bathroom. We were a small, close-knit group of classmates, and we would frequently have sleepovers and watch horror movies that were probably way too scary for a bunch of 6th graders to watch without adult supervision, but we enjoyed it. The bathroom in question had 3 stalls in it, and the one in the middle would occasionally make flushing noises on its own for seemingly no reason. None of us ever really believed it was haunted, it was mostly a joke, and we didn't take it seriously. One day, I needed to use the bathroom during class, and the teacher excused me to go alone. Let me describe the layout of this bathroom, as it's important to the story. The entrance to the bathroom starts with a heavy wooden door that creaks loudly and has an iconic swooshing sound when it closes. Then you turn right to make your way out from behind the privacy wall, and you get to the part of the bathroom with the sinks, 3 total on a ledge connected to the wall. From there, facing the sinks, you can turn and see the 3 bathroom stalls off to the right, 2 normal and 1 handicapped, that are against the back wall, parallel to the sinks. Directly in front of the 2 normal bathroom stalls is a blank wall that makes the area in front of the stalls feel narrow, a little like a hallway. In front of the handicapped stall, the space in front of it opens up into a deeper room that has a bench for people to sit on and a small shower off in the corner that nobody ever uses but is otherwise an empty, tiled room. So I go in there, and for some reason, maybe forgetfulness, I go into the middle stall. The bathroom was completely empty, but maybe a minute or 2 later, I heard the loud squeak of the heavy wooden door opening and closing, and someone came into the bathroom with me. I could hear the footsteps of them passing the sinks before I saw their shoes walk past the stall that I was in from under the door. They were little kid shoes, maybe pink Skechers, you know, the kind with little decorations on the sides that look like they should be able to light up. But these ones looked really muddy and dirt covered. I watched them walk past me, and I didn't hear the footsteps anymore, so I assumed they went to the handicapped stall to my right. Normally I wouldn't have paid any attention to this, but I was a 6th grader at the time, and the kid who'd walked past me seemed to be around kindergarten to 1st grade aged, and since the part of the school that had the little kid classrooms was all the way on the other side of the school, I thought I should wait for them to finish and walk them back to their class. And then I could tell them that next time they needed to use the bathroom, they should go to the ones near their classrooms. So I finished up and left the stall to go wash my hands. As I stood there, anticipating their departure, I became aware that none of the stall doors had closed. At this point I was sure that the kid had come here to hide from class, so I went to go see what they were up to. As I peeked in the door of the handicapped stall, nobody was in there. Nobody was in any of the stalls, actually. I checked the deeper room, thinking they might be hiding in the shower, but they weren't there. They weren't under the bench or the sinks, and unless they had somehow managed to climb the walls and squeeze into the ceiling tiles, there wasn't anywhere else to hide. I swear, I never heard the door to the bathroom open for them to leave. I never saw their feet walk back by my stall. I could see all the way to the wall in front of the stalls. They couldn't have gone past me unnoticed. I never heard their footsteps, and their extremely muddy shoes didn't leave a single print on the otherwise clean floor. They simply vanished. Needless to say, I went back to class quite a bit paler than I had been before and told my friends. After that, the stuff about the bathroom being haunted didn't really feel like jokes anymore. 2. Shadow Man. This next story is a contender for one of the scariest things I've ever seen with my own eyes. The year was either 2016 or 2017. I was a freshman in high school, and I had just gotten out of my weekly dance class across town. My dad came to pick me up because I couldn't drive, and so I was sitting in the passenger seat as he took me home. It was fall, sometime around 8 or 9 p.m., and it was dark outside. There's a shortcut my dad likes to take to avoid some traffic lights by driving down a smaller road that connects two of the larger ones. Several less ostentatious businesses, including car repair shops, HVAC repair, and a tax firm, line this road. It's a place with few streetlights. There's a business at the edge of the street near where we turn that I always look at because its address is 2221, and there's kind of a running joke in my family to point out triple numbers for some reason. The building only has the ground floor and is a little bit house-shaped, sloped roof, brick and wood paneling, and wooden front doors, except that instead of one front door, it has two, one on the left and one on the right, and wall lights beside either door to show that the stores were still open. As my dad turns onto the street, my eyes drift towards the building nonchalantly as usual, except this time what I saw there was anything but usual. The doors weren't closed. First of all, the left one was cracked open slightly, and I could see a man peering out from inside. He was an African American man, maybe in his 30s or 40s, and he was poking his head out from behind the door, keeping his body shielded behind the wood like one might do if they were opening the door to someone they didn't trust. What got my attention the most about this man was the look on his face. Pure terror. It gave me chills. His eyes were open so wide that even from the street, I could see the whites of his eyes all the way around his irises, and his mouth was ajar as if he was frozen in shock. He wasn't moving, just staring out into the parking lot in front of him. As our car continued to round the corner, I followed his gaze to try to see what he was looking at, and then I saw it. The parking lot wasn't empty like I had previously thought. There was a man standing about 10 feet away from him. However, it wasn't a man, it was a shadow that stood upright, perpendicular to the ground, rather than being flat against the pavement like a person would be. But I could see through its shadowy form, all the way to the car repair shop in the background. I practically pressed my face up to the glass to get a better look. The man was tall, definitely over 6 feet, probably closer to 7 or 8 feet tall, and he was thin and lanky. I could see the silhouette of clothing on him. He was wearing a top hat with a wide brim and a long coat, a trench coat or maybe a suit with tails, I couldn't quite tell, and he was holding a cane. He appeared to be conversing with the man behind the door, or at least directing his gaze downward. I watched the scene for as long as I could, craning my neck to watch them as our car drove past. I could see the shadow man from all angles, his right side, his back, and then his left. I could see the wall-mounted porch light through his back, and, although the light touched him, he himself didn't cast a shadow. Once they were out of sight, I spun around to ask my dad, "Did you see that?" And of course his reply was, "See what?" I told him what I saw, and he laughed, but it was fair. I wouldn't have believed it except that I saw it with my own eyes. I didn't ask my dad to turn back because, honestly, I was afraid. The whole ride home, and the rest of the night, for that matter, I kept replaying what I saw over and over in my head. It felt like I got a glimpse into someone else's waking nightmare. It felt like I saw something I wasn't supposed to. The next time we drove by that building, everything was normal, but a few weeks later there was a sign on the door, and I got the impression that the business was relocating. I didn't look into it though, now I wish I had. At the time, I had never even heard of the Hat Man or whatever people call him. It wasn't until a few months later that I saw it online and realized it basically matched what I saw that night. 3. Church radio. This one is the scariest in my opinion because it felt personal. All of the paranormal experiences I've had, even the ones I haven't told here, have felt like I was getting a glimpse into something I usually couldn't see, but this one felt directed at me. The event occurred in either 2017 or 2018, when I was likely a sophomore in high school, and it took place at my church. My church is not a hallowed place, but rather a warehouse that has been remodeled to resemble a church. Up until this point, I could feel an energy there, but it had only been small things, like creaking floors, cold rooms, feeling breathing on my neck, and just a general uneasiness about the back hallway. But this was the moment that solidified my bad feelings. It was around 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, the weekly youth group had wrapped up, and everyone had gone home except for me and my mom, because she had keys to lock up the building. My mom needed to water some of the plants, and she asked me to go look around for anything that needed cleaning up. I went down to the back hallway and began checking the rooms for messes. When I got to the nursery, I turned on the light and saw a toy on the table against the back wall. The only other thing on the table was an old AM/FM radio that nobody ever used. I got to work putting the pieces back together and putting the toy back in its place, and when I was done, I looked over the room one more time, and all was well, so I turned to leave. When I made it to the door and reached to turn the light off, however, I got a weird feeling. It felt like something inside of me was telling me to wait, that there was something that I needed to watch. So I turned around, and I waited. To this day, I don't know why I did this, standing there, staring into an empty room like that. I guess I just felt like I was supposed to. I remained in that position for approximately 30 seconds to a minute, feeling somewhat foolish. However, an unexpected event occurred. The radio turned on, all by itself. My eyes were wide as I watched the little red line begin to move across the channels as hissing static played loudly over the speakers. After a few seconds, I began to hear a voice. It was a man, and his voice was deep and garbled by the static. He was either speaking in a language that I couldn't recognize, or his voice was so drowned out by the static that I couldn't understand him. The conversation went on for a good 15 to 30 seconds, until the voice stopped and the radio turned itself back off. And I just stood there. I think I was in shock. Before that moment, it had never even occurred to me that the radio was plugged in, let alone still worked. I stood there for a minute or two. I felt frozen, waiting for the radio to turn back on and the man to speak to me again, but it never happened. What snapped me out of my paralysis, however, was the smell that began to drift toward me from the side of the room with the radio. It smelled like rotten eggs. At this point in my life, I had seen enough about ghosts and demons online to know that the smell of rotten eggs, or sulfur, could only mean bad things, so I switched the lights off and bolted out of the room to go find my mom in the church kitchen. The shock had worn off, and my brain was in full problem-solving mode. The sink in the kitchen has a history of giving off a slight sulfuric scent when using the hot water, so I ran to ask my mom if she'd been running the hot water. She said she'd only used the cold. The kitchen didn't smell like rotten eggs, so how would the smell have gotten all the way to the nursery that was a few hallways away? I still shake when telling this story, and to this day I have no idea what happened. All I know is that he was trying to talk to me. If anyone has any similar stories or insight they could give me, I would love to hear it. The spirit I named Ruth is terrorizing my fiancé and me. I moved into an apartment mid-May this year after moving out of my grandma's house. A few days after I moved in, I left my bedroom and saw a figure of what looked like a little girl in a dress in the kitchen. It scared the hell out of me, of course. I lived alone at this point. I would see or hear her occasionally, but I didn't really feel threatened by her, as I've been followed by another entity type thing since 5th grade. I'm 20 now, so I was used to it. My grandpa had come to give me things to furnish my apartment, and within a few minutes of being in my apartment, he told me he wanted to smudge my apartment. No matter where you are in the apartment, you feel uneasy and feel like you're being watched all the time. My fiancée, Katie, had moved in with me in July. She knew all about the ghosty girl and how I named her Ruth. We would hear the usual knocks on the walls or voices that don't belong to anyone in the other apartment units. As the walls here are pretty thick, you can't hear neighbors at all. At the end of September, things became scarier for both of us. My mom had moved around 2 minutes away from us, so I go hang out with her often. If my fiancé needs to sleep, I'll go alone. So I had run to the store with my mom so she could buy stuff for her new home, as she had lived with my grandma taking care of her until her death in the beginning of August, so she had nothing but bedroom things. Anyways, Katie was sleeping, but she knew I was with my mom. She texted me freaking out because when she had woken up, she heard voices, male voices, and footsteps in our apartment. I knew I locked both doors when I had left, so I knew it wasn't an intruder or anything. I tried to hurry back home. She had told me that she saw eyes staring at her from the kitchen, and then it walked out of view of the bedroom door. It was after sunset, so the apartment was dark. She told me it couldn't have been either of our two cats because the height of the eyes was about the height of a little kid. My thought was Ruth, but the male voice she heard. I wasn't so sure of what the hell it was. Maybe another spirit was with her too? She was really uncomfortable, as pretty much anyone would be in her position. One time we had kissed, and our bedroom door had slammed shut and freaked us out. The air wasn't on, so it wouldn't have been an AC draft. Many times, we haven't done this recently at our apartment. When one of us is in the bathroom and the other is in the kitchen, we will sneak in front of the bathroom door to try and scare the person who is in there when they walk out. I was in the bathroom, and I heard walking around in front of the bathroom, so when I walked out, I smiled because I knew she was going to try and scare me, but I knew her plan. She wasn't there, she was still in the bedroom, and I asked if she was trying to scare me, and she told me she hadn't even left the bedroom. Whack. After that happened, things got more interesting. Loud banging on the walls, voices, footsteps, the usual. I had a friend from California come and visit us, and we told him about Ruth, and he is, or was, a skeptic. As we were talking about Ruth and the shit she's done, the laundry detergent fell off of our dryer. All 5 of us, cats included, were in the living room, so it wasn't any of us. It freaked him out enough for him to start believing ghosts are real. Now for the more recent and, for us, terrifying part, the bathroom. The bathroom terrifies us both quite a bit. I have one cat specifically that freaks out whenever Katie or I are in the bathroom, yelling like crazy as if he's scared or something. His name is Meatball. He tends to sit on the sink and stare in the reflection and then start scratching at it while yowling. I find showering the scariest part of being in the bathroom. I sit on the tub's edge to shave my legs so I don't have to stand. The first time my back got poked through the curtain, I thought it was a cat, but I locked them out because Spaghetti, my other cat, loves water and will jump in with me. Anyways, I ignored it, thinking maybe the cats had opened the door. We have a sliding door for the bathroom, which the cats can easily open if it's unlocked, and came in, so I ignored it and went on doing my business. Then I got poked a second time, this time a bit harder. Then I thought maybe it was my fiancée ducking with me. I scare easily, so she likes to scare me randomly, so I thought that's what was going on. After feeling the harder poke in my back, I jumped up and looked out of the shower, and the bathroom was empty. I was alone in there with the door still locked, so of course I got really scared and hurried out of the shower and ran to the bedroom after I got dressed and told her. She told me she has similar experiences when she showers. She gets her legs touched often, and it scares her too. Since then we shower together so it's less scary for us. If I'm not showering with her, I'll sit on the toilet to keep her comfortable and give her company. I had to shower without her, and the same thing had happened again. I got poked in my back, and I jumped up like the last time to check. Again, I was alone in the bathroom, and the door was locked. Spaghetti and Meatball tend to, I think, stare at where Ruth could be. Meatball has become more scared acting. He always needs to be with one of us when we are home, or he will sit there and yowl until we go and calm him down. If we aren't home, he will sit in our bedroom window and wait for us to come home. When he sees us walking to the door, he runs to us when we come in. I think Meatball is more scared than Spaghetti. He will sit there and just stare somewhere and won't even acknowledge you when you say his name. He was an extremely outgoing cat until we moved in. Now he's a needy cotton ball. Not that I'm really complaining, lol. We had bought them a big cat tree. It's quite heavy, both of us are needed to carry it. Last week we were in bed. I was trying to take a nap, and she was playing video games, and the cats were both in the room with us. The cat tree had been pushed over, and we have 2 cat food bowls on different layers of the cat tree. One of them had shattered when the tree was pushed over. It wasn't me or her, the cats were with us, and it would have been way too heavy for them to knock it over. I tend to nap more often than I have before. I'm always tired and feeling the need to sleep, like Ruth is draining my energy. Katie is her normal self and doesn't need naps throughout the day to function well, like I do. A few days ago I was taking a nap, and my fiancée went to our living room to play video games on my PlayStation instead of hers that is in our room so I could sleep without waking me. I had almost fallen asleep when my calf was hit, but I ignored it to deal with when I woke up. I had asked her if she came in and touched my leg while I was asleep, and she said she's been in the living room since I decided to nap. Again, whack this time literally. We both feel that she's causing so much negativity in the apartment, causing us both to get angry at each other for little things that really shouldn't be an issue, but the second we leave the apartment, we are fine. Perhaps she causes it to create the negative energy she wants. For the past while I've been waking up every night between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., even with being on prescribed sleep meds. I'm thinking it has something to do with the spirit. We are so sick of everything that's happening, so I asked my grandpa to come smudge my apartment so we can attempt to get rid of her and her negative ass and invite more positive energy into the place. After my grandma died, most of my stuff was still stored at her house from when I lived there, so when my mom had to move out, she had taken my stuff to give it back to me. I've been too exhausted to go through the stuff and throw things I don't need away and whatnot. My grandpa is coming over, so I decided I have to do it. I've pushed it off for way too long, so I do it, as well as clean the apartment. Every time I would go to do something, I would feel extremely nauseous and ended up vomiting twice. The second time, Katie had come into the bathroom and was rubbing my back and then got me some water for when I was done. I had gotten extremely hot, so I decided to take a bath to try and cool off, and I felt really uncomfortable and extremely anxious. I had left the door open so I could call out to my fiancée if I needed anything, so I called her into the bathroom so I wouldn't have to be alone while I was in the bath. I'm not sick or pregnant, as we both are females, so I have absolutely no idea why I would all of a sudden get very nauseous, having to run to the bathroom so I don't vomit everywhere. She and my mom think Ruth knows my grandpa is coming over, as we have talked about it a few times while being home, so they think Ruth is doing this so nothing gets done so my grandpa doesn't come smudge the place. I feel that's quite possible. Tonight I was sitting on the bed, and my girl was next to me, and my thigh started burning, so I looked. I have 3 small scratches on my thigh and get scared because 3 scratches can possibly be a demonic entity mocking the Holy Trinity. I showed my fiancée, and she looked at me and told me it was Ruth. At first I saw a little girl, but I've heard countless times that a demonic entity will show itself as a child. With how everything is happening, I've been thinking it could be more of a demonic thing going on rather than just a little child spirit. My grandpa is coming over in the morning to try and get this place hopefully normal. My worries are if it is something more evil that after the cleansing happens, it will come back and be more angry than it is now. I'm sorry for what feels like an extremely long one. I had been woken up around 3 a.m., like I have been recently. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed facing the wall, and I felt my hair get tugged, so I turned around to see if Katie had woken up and did it, but she was still asleep, and then I felt a cold touch on my arm, so I decided to share my spooky past 6-month adventure with this creepy thing I have named Ruth. I don't know if anyone will see or even take the time to read my experience, but if anyone does, I'd appreciate any comments. Also, if you did make it this far, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to read about what's going on paranormal-wise in my life. On the last note I had mentioned another entity that has been following me since the 5th grade. Thank you again for listening to this long post. 2 weird experiences, at the exact same place, 14 years apart. 14 years ago my father and I were driving to work early, 4 a.m., along a rural Wisconsin road that runs along the Trimble River. While going around a curve to the right, we both saw a woman in a white dress, on the opposite shoulder of the road, running toward us with her hands up like she was trying to get our attention. We noticed her just before we passed her, and my dad hit the brakes and spun right around. It's a very curvy road, so we figured she may have gone in the ditch. We were probably only 100 feet from where we saw her when we turned around. We drove back almost a quarter of a mile when we didn't see her, in case she kept running. We couldn't find a car in the ditch or a person on the road, so she must have hidden in the ditch. It always seemed weird to me that someone would seemingly flag us down and then hide. I don't believe in ghosts, but I looked up any deaths along that road and couldn't find anything in that specific place at all. So within a few months I forgot about it. Today, around 2 p.m., I was driving down that same road and saw a bundle of roses that had been thrown out of a car. A bad Mother's Day for someone. Occasionally, I like to think of myself as an amateur photographer, and I thought it would be a really cool noir picture with everything in black and white except the petals torn apart on the road. Well, while I was taking some pictures, I realized it was quiet. No birds. No bugs. I couldn't even hear the water in the small river next to the road. All I could hear was the light wind. And I don't know how to describe how silence can feel loud, but it felt oppressive. Quiet like the woods on a winter night when all the birds are gone and the bugs are dead. Except the sun was shining in mid-May, and it was 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I jumped in my car and sped off. By the time I got around the next curve, I could hear the birds and the water again. That was when I remembered seeing that lady 14 years ago. And the roses were in the exact same spot she was running when we passed her. I don't know much about the paranormal, I don't believe in it myself. I know the roses are just a coincidence, but I can't explain that silence. It just felt unnatural and bad. I am just sharing to see if anyone has heard of a phenomenon like this. My brother and I have talked about investigating further, possibly late at night, but neither of us has a clue what we're doing. 2 houses I lived in 15 years ago are still haunting me. I've been experiencing weird things in my apartment for some time, and it has me thinking about 2 houses I lived in about 15 years ago with my family, the second one containing the majority of the activity. I'm not sure where else to get it all out, so I figured this space was appropriate. I'm in my late 20s now, and even thinking about it honestly still brings me to tears. It still scares me, so maybe this will be therapeutic in a way. For some background, my mom and I have had paranormal experiences our entire lives. I remember strange things happening in our home as a kid, but it really started to escalate when I was around 10 years old. We had recently moved into a new home to start over. I had a new stepdad, and this was the first house where we all lived under one roof together. One night, our neighbor's teenage son ended himself in their basement. We found out through a different neighbor that he had either been friends with and or babysat for someone who lived in our house before us, I can't remember which. Our house started getting weird after it happened. My little brother, who was 4 or 5 at the time, would wake up constantly in the middle of the night saying a boy kept asking him to play and wouldn't let him sleep. Mom would ask him questions, like what the boy looked like and what else he was doing, because this became an every night thing. The boy he described matched the description of the neighbor's deceased son. We had never met him. My brother, we'll call him B, was terrified of the second floor of the house. It was originally a large attic that had been converted into a bedroom. The stairs were pretty steep, so Mom took that bedroom. B never wanted to go up there unless Mom was there too. Our stepdad, we'll call him J, thought it'd be funny one day to mess with him. He told B that Mom was upstairs and wanted to see him. B walked up the stairs, and J closed the door. After a few moments, B started screaming bloody murder and banging on the door and said there was something up there that was scaring him. He sounded genuinely terrified, so J let him out and apologized and asked what scared him. He didn't say anything and barely talked the rest of that day and never brought it up again. When we moved into the house, there was a random pile of bricks in the basement. We weren't sure why they were there, but we didn't know what to do with them, so we just didn't mess with them. The washer and dryer were down there, so one night Mom was doing laundry while she was home alone. She heard a noise, like the bricks were moving, and she said one was thrown right past her head. If she had tilted her head even an inch more in that direction, it would have made contact. There was absolutely no explanation for it. Safe to say we immediately looked into moving. A couple of years later, when I was 13 years old, we moved into the house that still puts the biggest feeling of dread in my gut. Mom and Jay now had my 3-year-old sister, M. When we moved in, there was a new landlord, and he was having renovations done. It was an old house, so the floors downstairs especially needed some TLC. They were finishing those up when we moved in. One weekend, I had my best friend spend the night. She was acting really strange, so I asked what was up. She kept saying the house made her feel weird, and every time we were inside, she felt sick. We had one of those spirit box apps on an iPod, so we decided to use it and walk around the house. It kept saying hung in my closet, and everywhere else it repeatedly said run and go. In a corner of the app, it would constantly generate different letters. I was never really sure what those meant, but this time it was continuously generating J's initials. We'd used this app countless times before, and it never did any of that, so we were pretty freaked out. Some info before I tell this particular part of the story. The basement door was in the kitchen, and it was extremely heavy. I could barely even open this door. M was only a toddler, so Mom had it shut and locked at all times. It was an unfinished basement, and we had other areas in the house for storage, so we never went down there anyways. My parents worked at the hospital, and they were mostly on the midday shift, so they were there well into the evenings, and I was finally deemed old enough to be able to stay home by myself instead of going to our grandparents' house. So one night I was home alone, playing Sims, and listening to music. These were the days of listening to music on YouTube. Many horrible quality recordings. So I had a random playlist going, and I started to hear talking in the background of the song. I figured the video quality just wasn't great and went to change it, but when the song stopped playing, the voices didn't. My immediate thought was, oh, the neighbors are outside again, because anytime the window was open and they were outside, they were so loud it sounded like they were right next to you. I went to close the only window in the room, and it was already closed. My next thought was someone had to have left a TV on in the house when they left earlier that day. I went to every room in the house with a TV in it, and nothing was on. But something I did notice was the voices never got more distant, and the volume never changed. Honestly, I was freaking out so badly at this point that I was not registering what the voices were even saying. But it sounded like two men just having an everyday conversation, like how you would talk to a coworker or acquaintance. Since we still had the floors being worked on downstairs, I wondered if maybe a couple workers were somehow still there. I went downstairs, and I was alone. The driveway was also empty. I could still hear those men. I started panicking and went upstairs, locked myself in my room, and called Mom's unit, bawling my eyes out. The men even sounded like they were in my bedroom with me. Once she got to the phone, I heard heavy footsteps, like someone wearing big work boots, downstairs, stomping from room to room. The basement door kept opening and slamming shut, shaking the house. My mom was using another work phone to call anyone nearby to come to the house, as she and Jay were about 30 minutes away. I was so terrified, I wondered if I was ever even going to see Mom again, just pure fear. All of a sudden, everything stopped. Luckily, the landlord was not even 5 minutes away and rushed to the house. He said there were no signs of forced entry, nothing was missing, no footprints, the basement door was still locked, and no one was in or around the house. The only thing that was abnormal was my food had been knocked off the counter and was scattered around the kitchen. I was never home alone after that. I refused. Mom started having really strange experiences as well. She would hear my voice, clear as day, say, "Hey, Mommy, come here, I want to show you something," and she would almost go to my room before realizing she was home alone. I had experienced the same, except it was her voice asking me to come see her. Mom would see a figure of this girl out of the corner of her eye frequently, just standing there and watching her. She said from what she could tell, she seemed to be a teenage girl, maybe around my age, because multiple times she assumed it was me even if I wasn't home or I was standing right in front of her. Mom started having dreams. Often it was the same angry man bursting into their room while she hid in the closet, and he always ended up ending her. He had an issue with wetting the bed, so to try to prevent it, Mom would wake him up and take him to the bathroom before she went to bed. One night she woke him up, and he kept groaning, like he was in pain. She asked what was wrong, and he said he felt sick. She asked if he had to puke and brought him over to the toilet and walked out to go grab something for him. As soon as she was out of the door, he rushed up and shut and locked the bathroom door. He immediately started screaming and crying. He was banging on the door, and we heard his nails scratching all over it, and he was crying for us to let him out. I had to break down the door to get to him. But it was odd. We were all in the hallway, shaken and upset, and he had this really vacant look. We asked him what had happened and what was wrong, but he was extremely confused and didn't remember any of it. To this day, he doesn't remember. Em hated being in her bedroom. She never wanted to be in there with anyone, not even to play. Mom thought she was just going through a phase and was trying to help her fall asleep one night. Em kept saying the girl. And pointing at a wall, Mom asked, "What girl?" Em told her there was a girl who cried a lot, wore her hair in pigtails, and would say, "I hate your mommy," before crying harder and floating through the wall. At this point, Mom was not ducking around anymore and had done some research online. She had read that you can take pictures of an area with activity and maybe catch something on film. So Em took Mom around the house and pointed out where this girl was, and Mom took around 50 pictures. To be clear, Mom and Jay never smoked in the house, no one was cooking, and no candles or incense were burning. Every single photo had this thick blue smoke in it. We didn't wipe the lens, just to make sure, and after Em said the girl was gone, Mom took another few pictures. No smoke. We had a video camera, and one night this ball was rolling all throughout the first floor of the house. Keep in mind, these floors were just done. No warping, no curves, they were perfect. This ball was rolling in loops, from room to room, never slowing or increasing in speed. After a couple of minutes of recording, it stopped abruptly and never did it again. We watched the video back, and, 2010 quality aside, it was clear as day. But when we brought the camera to someone's house to show them, the video was a black screen. At this point, we contacted a priest from down the street to come over and bless the house. He took one step onto our porch and said he felt ill and didn't want to come inside. He refused any time after that. So we called local paranormal investigators. The whole time they were there, no activity was happening, and they generally didn't seem to believe us. Before they left, they knocked on a wall 3 times to see if something knocked back. Silence. They kind of laughed at us and left. Literally the second the front door closed, we heard 3 slow, loud knocks on that same wall. Things started to get more frequent after that. Whatever it was, we were slowly making it more irritated. Mom prefers incense over candles, and she has a huge collection of different scents. People frequently got them for her as gifts as well. One day she had a new scent, frankincense. All of our bedrooms were on the 2nd floor, and she burned it in her bedroom window. Strangely enough, after this, like 75% of the activity upstairs decreased. It was still there, but not quite as bad. Everywhere else. I can't say the same. I started to feel very uneasy, especially on the staircase. I would feel like someone was breathing down my neck or waiting for me at the top or bottom landing, whichever way I was going. Something I just couldn't shake. One evening I was heading upstairs for the night. As I was walking up, Mom started talking to me, so once I got to the top landing, I turned around and continued the conversation. Now, I was barefoot, nowhere near the edge of the steps, there was no spill, and no one else was upstairs. I started to feel this odd sensation on my back, like there was a hand touching me. The next thing I knew, I was falling down the stairs. It was like my legs were suddenly kicked out from under me. Luckily I wasn't hurt, just sore and winded, but Mom was horrified. She said the way my body fell was not ordinary for someone who just slipped or fell on their own. One evening Jay was on the night shift. I was getting ready for bed, and Mom said, "Pack a bag now, we're staying the night somewhere else." I was super confused because it was a school night, but she wouldn't tell me what was happening. We got out to the car, and I realized I left something inside. Before we left the house, Mom would always do a walkthrough to make sure every light was off. When we turned around, facing the house, every single light was on. Even the lamps and nightlights. I decided I didn't need whatever it was, and we drove to our grandparents' house. At this time, Mom and I had never really discussed what was going on in our house. I knew it, she knew it, but there was so much denial. I kept bugging her, asking what happened, and she finally told me. She had confronted the landlord about everything that day. He looked into the property and discovered the history. Multiple people had died in the house over the years, including a man who went into cardiac arrest in our living room and dropped dead. There was an old woman who had been left to rot by her grandson in what was now M's room. It's sickening to even think about that. We'd always wondered why there was an old latch on the outside of my sister's bedroom and had deduced it was just something odd left over from renovations. The house had originally been a single-family home but was converted into two halves, so there were odd choices throughout from the split. That evening, a maintenance worker needed to get in the crawl space under the house. He crawled out without finishing the job and said he couldn't go back in there. He had found deep pits under our house with broken shovels peeking out and old, dirty work boots inside. We came back to the house the next day because Mom needed a game plan. She found some friends of a friend who were part of a different paranormal team and asked them to come spend a night in the house. They said there was such a dark presence there. They picked up what they believed were multiple spirits, some good/neutral, some very angry. At one point it was brought up that they believed there could be a portal on the property. I'm not really sure what all that entails, so I don't remember those details. They thought there could be a demon present, especially once Mom told them that she and I heard each other speaking frequently when the other wasn't home. They apparently can mimic voices to duck with you. Once the reduced activity upstairs was brought up, they asked what scents Mom burns and looked at her collection. They had a theory that the frankincense had essentially banished the worst spirit from entering the second floor. She was told never to burn it again in case it was quarantined to one area, the stairs, and made even angrier. Not long after, it was New Year's Eve. Mom and Jay had plans to meet up with some work friends. While he was out running an errand, she was home alone, running a bath. After a few minutes in the tub, she started feeling a sharp burning sensation on her upper arm. When she looked down, she had a fresh, bright red scratch snaking all around her arm. She freaked out, grabbed some clothes, and drove away.
M, and I were never allowed to go back inside the house, and we all stayed with our grandparents for about a week until Mom and Jay managed to find another place in town.
There are other bits and pieces here and there, but this was all I could remember off the top of my head. Ever since then, we've still had shit happen in our homes, but nothing even close to what went on in that house. Over the years I've driven past that house a few times here and there, and it never seems to have any people living in it. Good riddance.